next?
So I know that the LDS Church so far has said no, they're not interested in that. However, I did reach out to Faith Baptist, and they're considering it. And I'm still gonna maybe ask the other one that's on Hemphill Road. But there's a couple other ideas. I mean, certainly, there's a conference center. And another idea that I had was possibly the golf course. Because, that's off season, so, I don't know, we'll see. But I'm just saying, hey, what?
How about the Armory?
The Armory's a great idea.
I mean,
and-
because if I'm thinking right, we own, maybe we don't. Maybe we gave it all up, I don't know. But at one time, we owned a third. And then the Army gave their share to the school district. And I don't know if we did anything, but anyway, the Armory has, the times fit, school hasn't started, so they'd have to be out before, but it's got restrooms a little larger than,
Right. Well, and then you can put more than
you could
15
put
to
more than
20 cots in
16
there.
people in cots in there, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm just kind of sharing that as well, just so you guys are aware of that.
So,
Go ahead.
you mentioned last time busing.
Busing, yes, that,
How, the
So-
logistics of that, how would you
so.
even know how to start? You can get a bus, great, but
Yeah.
pick
So-
people up, hey, drop,
Yeah.
that,
So that's why I'm saying that
You have to go.
there isn't solid decisions made. There's certainly been a lot of ideas that has bubbled up, which is good. I mean, that's what you want to do, but, so the way that the transportation would work is, based upon the point in time count, the county already knows the locations of where these people kind of hang out and where the hot pockets are, and most likely the best places to go. So when we know that there's a cold blue night, then you start in those areas, and it's one of those things. I mean, you can only offer it, whether they take you up on it or not, who knows? But you certainly offer that. You can come around, you let them know that, okay, well, we'll take you to a warming center. You're welcome to stay there overnight. We'll provide a place for you to rest and some food. But we'll turn around and bring you back here where we picked you up the next morning. I mean, that's the ideal scenario.
what if it's still
But-
cold?
So if it's still cold, you mean throughout the day?
Yeah.
Below
Yeah,
18?
I could,
Yeah, I don't think, I don't know that we've thought that through, but that's where probably the legislature's is pushing more towards a permanent solution, which, we don't have it yet, but we're at least still in the code blue. In the past, so far, our weather hasn't done that, so that's why they feel comfortable saying, okay, well, we'll take them back out at 7 a.m. And then if it happens again that same day, then you turn around, pick them back up and bring them back in. And the thought with the task force right now is, rather than encumber one city with having to deal with it constantly, that if we share and move it around, then one that takes the burden off of a city, it mitigates any mingling, once they're out. And then also it makes it to where realistically we're only looking at maybe four nights during the season, 4 to 8 nights during the season.
so we've thrown out stats for the teen homelessness, 1,200, 1,600, 1,500 youth.
Yeah, that's fluctuated. It started out like
Yeah.
at 15 and then it dropped down to 12.
Do we know how many homeless,
Youth there are?
no, others that we're talking about, this code blue,
Okay, so
who are experiencing this?
Based
How
on-
many people?
based on the point in time count, this last season, there was 46 that were identified throughout the county. And I think we had 17 in our city alone. but
46 in the entire county and with 1,500 youth.
that are homeless. But they're probably.
They count that a lot differently, you know.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
they're in people's homes. They're
Yeah, I
floating.
mean, they could be at someone's home, they're just not where their parents are or with their parents somewhere else.
The real concern is the fact that the increase in families or single parents with kids, that's what.
Well, the last resort is probably, we don't have no place to go, we're just gonna hang out on the street for
Yeah.
families. But there are places that we even have used some of our funds for open doors and places that have.
Yeah, and that's one
shelters
thing,
for
Layton
families,
City's done a
safe
good
harbor.
job at that. We put our funding towards that, and which has gone towards hotel and motel vouchers. And, you know, we were actually helping take people up to the Lantern House in
Yeah.
Ogden and that, but they're saying, hey, wait, time out, you know, we're full. And so I think that's why it became a bigger deal at the legislature, and when the legislature has kind of pushed this on Davis County and Utah County to kind of come up with a solution,
Do you
long-term
think
solution.
they're going to beef up their data collection? Because the point-in-time studies, I mean, they give you some information, right, but it's point in time. I think the schools have an advantage because they're seeing kids regularly, right? And so they have access to more information, more data about them. Whereas for the adults, because we don't have, you know, shelters like that, for example, like in Salt Lake, we don't really have that kind of information.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's easier to say it's not here, it's not a problem, but that's also because we don't really know. But if the state is tasking the counties with a solution, then they also need to help us with
The data.
data collection.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I will say the task force has said, that, you know, you have additional data, because right now we're basing it upon the point count.
Is my concern is you're in the meetings, we're not in the meetings.
Right.
Is that this is a county, it's their lane. This is what they do.
Mhm.
They have the health department, they have these, that's their deal. And really, I think we should be careful that we're not taking that from them, or being asked to take it from them.
Oh, believe
when
me.
They have to.
We pushed that back on them. The task force has pushed that, and they got a nice rendering of the purpose of a task force. So, all right, we probably spent enough time on that, I think, but certainly, you know, like I said, any questions you guys have at any point in time, I'm willing to answer them. And I'll guarantee you, if it gets to the point where we gotta make decisions, I'll certainly be saying, okay, how do we all feel about it?
You did make the comment today, when I asked you at the teen center,
Yes,
like, she was saying like maybe July,
yeah,
that it would be up and running.
yeah, that's the other one that, I don't have any details on it yet, but they're talking like that
So that's
could
kind of
be doing a grand opening here
yeah.
pretty soon for that center as well. But they're moving along with it.
Yeah.
Hey, any council reports?
I went to Bryce for the Utah Prevention Coalition Association Summit. It was a good time. It's always good to see other people who are focusing on prevention of drugs and alcohol and suicide in our young people. So there were a number of other city officials, state officials, and folks who just work in prevention all around. And we talked a lot about ways to convince the legislature to focus on that prevention aspect. And with the opioid settlement money, they talked about things like that and how the coalitions are working with the legislature to show them the data about how prevention helps in the long run, much better than us having to put more money in the enforcement side. Because if we can prevent our kids from getting hooked to any of these types of substances, vaping is like the big thing, as you all probably already know, but there's more discussion and work around how to prevent those things from happening in the beginning, so that we don't have to worry so much about, all of these other things, because even the homelessness, those are all byproducts of other things. And so if we focus more on preventing those things at the young ages that our children already are, then the idea is that, in the next 10, 20 years, we would hopefully not have to put as much money into these other types of services. So it was a good conference. We do have for CTC a key leader meeting next Friday, the 28th. You should have received an email about that. It will be at 1 o'clock. And if you didn't receive an email, I'll follow up and make sure that you do for all the key leaders.
I think we did, I put in my phone, the one.
Yeah, we had to reschedule it because it was scheduled for this week, but we had to reschedule.
Anyone else?
Looking forward to spending a lot of time on 4th of July with you guys.
Well, just because we won't meet again, Voices of Liberty is a week from Sunday.
Sunday the 30th.
Yeah, and you've got the text from Hometown Hero schedule. And,
Yeah.
I mean, as much, I get the fact that everybody has busy schedules, and we'll just do the best we can. It's worked out, and we'll continue to work it out. And as we get closer on the holiday, I'll give you details as far as where we're meeting. We might need help unpackaging some popsicles again. We did that last year, and I think that helped tremendously. So, once I have those details, we'll fill you in on it. Okay, let's go ahead then and move on to item number 3, which Tracy, you basically got all 3 of them coming up here, so I'll let you start with the consolidated fee schedule.
So the first one is ordinance 24-18, and so to review a few of the things that were changed in here, and you have these in your packet, but just for the public's sake to look at them for briefly. Event security, it's proposed by PD to increase that from 70 to 85, and sorry, I probably should have just put the pages that had changes in here. For Commons Park, rental of the new round pavilion out there, at the front of the park, that wasn't part of what was in here before, and so there's some fees proposed for people to be able to reserve and rent that pavilion out there in the summer and then in the winter. And if there's any questions on any of these, let
Just
me know.
I'm curious, how busy, or the event security, how popular is that with our police department?
I think they do
They
that
do
quite
it a lot.
often.
Do it a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think they do it quite often. I've not.
Here or other places, or how does that, or if they're needed in another city for another event, is that how that, or?
I don't know that I've heard of other cities for other events, but just other outside entities that want to have a presence, a police presence at their event.
Within the city?
Yeah, typically. So sometimes we'll
A
have
lot
a
of it.
special event permit that to have a race or some kind of a function within the city, that we tell them they need to have security, and they can provide it independently, or sometimes they'll try to get off-duty officers and things like that.
Not volunteers?
Yeah.
Good, okay, thanks.
Then we have the meter fees in the water department. The cost of meters is obviously increased with everything else that's increased, and so engineering has proposed these meter fees that are basically just based on cost of those meters, so those needed to be increased. These would be fees that mostly the developers are paying when they're paying their building permit and so forth, so that they can buy those meters. Then we have discussed
The same fees are for the secondary hookup though? I've noticed that you have that line on the
Yeah,
line.
yeah, I think that's, oh yeah, secondary water fees as indicated above, so depending on the size, they're all the same. Because now they've switched to where the meter's gonna be, they're using that octave meter, and so it's gonna be the same cost, whether it's secondary or not, although most of the secondary, I believe, are 1-inch meters, so they're all the same size, unless it's a large
When-
park or something.
When we put in a secondary water meter, do we have to put in a special filter? Because the water there is
I don't believe so. I think that's well, you probably want to filter it no matter what, is my,
Well, you're gonna have
is my
to filter it.
personal opinion. I'm
They
not sure.
filter it after, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
You're saying a filter before
Well,
it
we don't
goes through the
filter
meter.
it
We haven't,
before.
as far as I'm aware, we have not made that
Okay.
statement.
I
Okay.
think they've improved the quality of the meters a lot over the years, so they can handle, because you use the same meter for both culinary.
Yeah.
Right.
I've heard when they first started metering secondary Weber Basin, they had to replace a lot of them after a couple of years. But I think the technology's better, I guess.
We've talked about the sanitary sewer fees, 8.2% increase, so that will increase all of these fees from $29.45 to $31.86, and then the per 1,000-gallon fee on these different groups from $2.25 to $2.43. There's also street lighting system. Now, these are for the fixtures, so again, these would be what development is paying. They come in, they have a development, they're gonna pay for the street lights up front. We go and buy them, and then we store them until they're ready to put them in. And I believe we have our contractor put those in as well, so these are just the prices that have gone up. And again, we don't have a built-in profit in these or anything, they're just, this is the cost to buy those fixtures. I believe that's all of, there was one other one in here, I must have missed it somehow. It had to do with building code and fire.
Yeah, I've never seen that.
I don't know where it went.
That's why
Oh, maybe it's down in the building section instead of fire. I thought it
So
was
there was fire right there, it just wasn't in red, you must.
Oh, it just wasn't in red?
Yeah,
Okay,
but you,
sorry.
in our packet it was.
Okay. Well, it has to do with the air breathing systems that you can now put in those larger, like an apartment complex or a large industrial building. Now the fire code is requiring that they put these breathing systems in it, and Scott can correct me if I'm wrong, so that the firemen can hook into that system to be able to travel throughout the building, and there's different places where they have those. So we wanted to have that in our code as far as the review fee, so that we can go into those buildings and the plans and be able to review them. I don't know if Chief Mon has anything to add related to that.
I think what it was is square footage is over 250,000 square feet is what we did. And buildings over 6 stories high, including basement to roof. So that gives us the opportunity that if we, where they put that and it's maintained, it's just like the SCBA refill stations that we have in our stations, they're the same thing. And they're required by code to be maintained and tested annually, so that if we get a problem and we're stuck in there or something, our people can go right to it and take a connection right off our pack and hook into it and either refill or sit there and breathe off that air until we can come get it. It's a pretty neat thing
Yeah. I like
for
that.
those big buildings.
So those are all the fee changes. I don't know if there are any other questions? Okay.
Any questions? Okay, go ahead and proceed then. There's a budget next.
So the next thing for us to review, if that's all right, Mayor? Move forward on to the next item, are amendments to the current fiscal year budget, 23-24, ordinance 24-16. So in summary form, we can see that, and I can just ask, I mean, you've reviewed the packet, are there any specific details? I don't want to have to go through every detail on them. If you have specific questions, it might be easier to ask that. In summary, we have in the general fund, $238,000 that we've needed to appropriate fund balance in order to cover those unanticipated expenses. That'd be in the public defender area, street maintenance and operation, and also the ski bus. So those areas, the expenses were a little larger than what we anticipated. Honestly, to keep that down to 238 for most of the year, that's pretty good from my perspective. And then we had revenue that we received that we didn't have an estimate for, so a lot of times the grants and things, I don't like to budget those in advance because sometimes you may not get them or they're less than what you think. But this is revenue, like wildland fire, we don't know when we're gonna be sent on that, or police special services, if they go out and do some kind of an activity for which they receive money, then we're not sure exactly how much that's gonna be either. The fire academy, other donations, and then revenue that we received as part of the dispatch consolidation when Clearfield came over. That's actually a big part of the 830. That was, close to half of that money. And then, like I mentioned, grant revenue that was unanticipated that we received. All these are police acronyms, or that one might be a fire acronym, sorry. But then the clean diesel program that we got for turning in one of our old fire engines and being able to use that towards a new one. And then the Rocky Mountain Power grant that was received. So overall in the general fund, revenue that was unanticipated, and then reappropriating that for $1,528,000. In some of the other funds that were out there, we had basically just additional funding in the metro area. There was overtime and supplies. We were able to pull money from this coming year in order to cover some of that, and then from past years' grants as well to cover some of that. Proposition 1 on the Welker and Hidden Hollow to Hobbs Trail projects, there were some overruns on expenses there, and so we've used Proposition 1 fund balance in order to cover those additional expenditures. Building services, that's the arrangement where all of our building permit revenue has to go into a separate fund now. And so there was additional revenue in there that needed to be recognized, and additional wage expenses related to that could be covered. We had a ramp grant that was transferred to the museum to pay for interns that were programmed there. In CDBG, we recognized a number of prior year revenue grants from prior years. The revenue for the school district land purchase, that's related to the program where they go out and build homes for different category, for moderate income category individuals that apply for those homes. In the capital projects, that swings back up mostly to the money that was received in the general fund, wildland fire money that got reprogrammed over to capital projects, clean diesel program, and also recreation equipment that went into capital projects. And emergency medical, the same. A large chunk of that is wildland fire, and then just some separate grants that were received for medical supplies. In the water fund, there was a repair of a 10-inch line that went under I-15, which is the bulk of this expense. And then we did have some billing anomalies that we discovered during the year where we had to reimburse the Greyhawk development for some overbilling that took place. And let's see, street lighting repair, increase in maintenance and repair. The athletic fund, it was determined that we could use, the athletic fund is built up at okay fund balance, and so it was determined we should use that to cover some of the equipment that's needed to run those programs in the athletic fund. And then in the swimming pool fund, we needed to increase the transfer from the general fund over to the pool fund. Most of what I determined on that was that their revenue was simply lower than anticipated, and we don't know what June would bring, and so I recommended an amendment so that we didn't end up over budget in that fund, or more, that we wouldn't end up in a deficit fund balance in that fund. So that's the purpose of that amendment there. So that's the summary, and I've probably described most of the details, so hopefully I didn't bore you too much with that.
No, that's good.
Question, curious about last year, I think it was last year, we changed how we did the janitorial service.
Yeah,
To move, how has that been?
it's been
As
good.
far as savings, as far as service?
We feel like the service is really good now. We did start with one company, and we weren't getting the performance out of them that we anticipated. And so we broke the contract with them. I mean, we only had to give them 30 days notice, so it wasn't a big deal. But we did discontinue the contract with them and start a new one, and we've been much more satisfied with this company. So the first one was maybe more, we were led to believe a certain amount of people would show up and do the work, and they didn't. And we had a hard time getting them to do things that we were pointing out. There were a number of pictures and things from, especially from the pool and the locker rooms over there, where cleaning just wasn't happening to a satisfactory level. So that's probably too much about that, but ultimately, when we discovered and gave them a few warnings, then we changed the contract to a new vendor, and they're doing much better. And that vendor bid originally, and they are a little more expensive, but they're putting in probably 3 times as many hours. And Corey's been monitoring that with, I mean, he can monitor it with the cameras in different areas and see when they come and when they go and their card access, and be able to, he watched it really well at first for probably the first month, just to make sure they were gonna do what they said. But over time, you can tell by the condition of the areas if they're doing the work or not. So, and we seem happy with them right now. So,
Thanks.
yep.
Any other questions, guys?
Maybe it's just a procedural one, but when you have a table like this that shows, revenue from outside sources and revenue from, or I guess in fund balance transfers from internal sources, how do we kind of, maybe as a council, how do we track that to make sure that, like if you get a grant funding for $300,000, that's different than a fund balance transfer of $300,000, right?
Right.
And so I guess if they're all on the same line, all on the same table, is it in the, I mean, it's sure it's in the budget, but this is a budget amendment, right?
Right.
So maybe this is what I'm talking about.
So in the details, I do try and line up,
Okay.
For example, if you have this 92,000 in police revenue that's part of the Davis area public safety, and so this is the expenditure side. Down here in the revenue side, you should see this same number right here that says, okay, we got this revenue, and up above, that's where we're going to appropriate it.
Okay.
And so this detailed picture is for you to be able to see, but then also in the budget, we can run a report that shows the original budget, any transfers that are made, any amendments that are made, and where we are today with the budget. And so at any time, if you had a question about a particular account, we can look at that and see what amendments have been made, what changes are there, and we track those back. Off to the side of this spreadsheet, you would see that I wrote journal numbers, and a lot of times I actually bring the whole journal book in here with me in case there's a question, so that I can turn to that journal number and say, okay, here's the detailed paperwork behind it, the signatures, the support documents.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming, that's why I asked if it was just procedural, because I'm sure you were accounting for it. I just wanted to see where it was, so thank you.
Yep. Good?
Any others?
Okay.
Good. I got one more here that you get to talk to us, or enlighten us on, which is the compensation and statutory of appointed officers, as well as, we're going over the fiscal year.
So this next one is just the full budget, okay? So adopting the budget, ordinance 2417, the budget, property tax rate, and the compensation schedule. We had the whole meeting last time about the compensation and so forth, so I won't go into too much detail on that. But the summary, and you've seen this a couple of times as well, but for the public's sake, the fiscal year budget for 2025, the general fund is just over $46 million. Citywide budget, which includes all the utility funds, is $138 million. The budget proposes market and cost of living adjustments for the mayor, officers and employees of the city, not including the council. There's $2.4 million in equipment, $30.8 million in capital projects when you talk about utilities as well, especially. The budget proposes 4 full-time positions, and those are an emergency manager, I have that written down here somewhere, an emergency manager, a part-time recreation facility manager, 2 part-time crossing guards, and the other a fire inspector. So a full-time fire inspector. So those are and 2 stormwater operators, so maintenance operators. So 4 full-time, 3 part-time. The major projects, as we've discussed before, the Emergency Communication Dispatch Center, work on West Hillfield Road, potential land purchase for the Public Works Shop, and potential land purchase for the Sugar Street realignment, and then a long list of utility projects in all of the different utilities, water, sewer, storm, streets projects, and so forth. That's the summary of what's proposed. You've actually seen these revenue and expense items, and then last time, as part of the public hearing, which we did continue until this meeting, we discussed changes from the tentative budget. Probably the biggest two in there are the addition of the emergency manager position in the EMS fund and the sewer rate increase of 8.2%, the sewer rate increase. So I don't know if there's any questions on any of that. My recommendations in the council meeting will obviously be to adopt both of the ordinances, the one amending the current year and the one adopting the upcoming year.
Is there a timeline for the 2700 West project? There is a timeline, I'm sure. Do we?
You mean the road
Yeah, what's
being
gonna be done?
paved and
Yeah.
what's?
They're working on it.
Yeah.
I don't know that myself.
They're actually down to the light.
Section,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
close.
They just have to lay, well, like I know.
Yeah,
Easy to
Dave?
put a little asphalt in there.
And he owns right next door.
He watches it all the time.
Yeah,
Do we have a time frame when we'll know financially what that 8.2% sewer increase is looking like? Like January, February, March, you know, when we'll have an idea of if it's having the effect that we want it to have?
Sure. I mean, I monitor those numbers frequently, and I could report back to you, on a monthly basis if you'd like, and see, just to see. I mean, maybe we wait for the first quarter to go by, because really we won't start billing that until the August bill.
Yeah.
And so then you're not really gonna see the results of it until after that, and if we give it a few months, then we could come back, especially around the time I present the annual financial report, and just give an update of where we're at, how much has it changed?
Yeah, thank you.
That's a good idea.
And the reason I say that is that obviously we have the 8.2, and then that's supposed to be 8.2, 8.2, 8.2. But I know I feel comfortable at a one-year approach and seeing, like we've done with our water rates, to make sure that it's necessary.
That it's
You
covered,
don't just
yeah.
do it just because we decided to do it. So I would appreciate, 6 months is a good time frame. It doesn't need to be every month, but maybe we can, before we get into the major budget meeting in the spring, just so we can kind of have our eye on it, so. thank you.
Absolutely.
Good idea.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no more questions, then we'll go ahead and go on to Chad. He's gonna, talk about a rezone request, an annexation.
Should be able to click on that one.
All right. As Mayor said, this is an annexation and rezone. This is a property that we discussed quite a bit over the last several months. And you'll recall this property was purchased by the city several months ago. There was a long-time option on the property for the city to purchase this property, purchase it from Waste Management District. These are the properties outlined in red. You can see they're just to the very northern terminus of Fairfield Road. Purpose of this, of course, as we've discussed many times before, is to further the objectives of our economic development area, the Eastgate Economic Development Area, which is to continue to support the development of aerospace-related industry around the base there. This particular purchase of land will also facilitate the extension of Fairfield Road to the north. So we don't know exactly where that alignment's going to fall, but somewhere in that area there'll be an extension of Fairfield Road that will eventually, according to our master plan, tie back over into the Church Street area and 1700 east over there. So this is the next step. We're excited about it. We've done the proper noticing for this annexation. The reason that there's a zone change is our ordinance automatically, anytime the property comes from the county, it's automatically zoned agricultural. So this would take it from agriculture to M1, which is the same zone as those surrounding properties. Again, about 24 acres total there, we've got outlined in red. You see the existing developments there, Keomac, Janicki, and then that building that's being built on the jail, or it's built now, on the jail property. This is just a quick copy of that economic development area plan, Eastgate EDA, showing some of those areas we talked about, the EDA boundary and the eventual extension of that Fairfield Road. Here's the plat. Not much to say about that, other than that's the official document that gets that annexed into the city. So with that, we are recommending the council approve this annexation request and the rezone from A to M1. Happy to answer any questions if I can.
Any questions? Okay.
Great,
Sounds
thanks.
good. Yeah, just glad to see it proceed.
Right.
Okay. The next one's an interlocal agreement, you're gonna do it as well?
I think we're gonna tag team, Morgan and I will tag team this one. I'm gonna invite him up just to give a brief, I guess, preamble to our comments on this. This is, I'm sorry? Yes, I will, yep. So we're happy to have our county counterparts here with us tonight from the Community Economic Development Department there, Davis County. They're here that they can answer some questions if you have any for them a little bit later on. I want to just talk in general about this. I'm going to let Morgan talk just a little bit about the background of what this home program is. It's another program that's available from HUD, from the Housing Department of Housing and Urban Development. It's in that same line of CDBG programming funding, available for very similar purposes. So I'm going to let Morgan give a little bit of background on that program, and then I'll jump in and talk a little bit about the proposed agreement, the consortium agreement, some of the changes that we've asked to be made to that agreement over the last month or so as we've been working back and forth with county staff, and then we'll open it up for any questions that you may have. So with that, Morgan, you want to talk a little bit about home?
Yeah, so about 7 months ago, we were approached by the county for additional funding outside of CDBG funding. This is a separate program, but it would accomplish many of the same housing activities that we're doing, give us additional resources to accomplish some things we like to do. This is federal grant funding from HUD for states and localities for affordable housing activities. Normally, we wouldn't be able to apply for this funding on our own. We wouldn't be able to qualify to meet the HUD minimum $500,000 funding threshold. And so that's why the county would like Layton City and the county and Clearfield City to form a consortium and sign an agreement where we would work together to tackle some of these housing challenges that are throughout the community. Joining this consortium will help us tap into a larger pool of funds to participate in this type of program. The thing that appealed to our department, top of mind, was rental assistance. Rental assistance right now is a key issue in our community, and there's a significant waiting list right now with the Davis Community Housing Authority for rental assistance. The number of new applications with them is increasing quite a bit. So that would be a top priority from our department's perspective, just from the number of inquiries we get every week and the county receives. And then according to the agreement, here are some of the priorities. Like I said, these are housing-based activities to help low-income families. You'll see some of those are very similar to other activities we're doing, like home repair rehab, down payment assistance, and other related housing activities. But the one that, even though it's number 8 on the priority list, I'd like to see that one a little bit higher. Tenant-based rental assistance is one that I'm really excited to have in this agreement. I think would be very beneficial to our community.
So Morgan's mentioned this. I want to talk a little bit about why these priorities are important to us. So as we've worked with the county over the last several weeks, staff did have a few things we wanted to try to work through, some concerns we have about the structure of the consortium. I'm going to come back to this, but first talk about one thing we asked as far as a change, and that is the representation of any kind of funding committee. So as we worked with the county, we it was really important to us that Layton had, because this is a 3-member consortium, it's really Clearfield, us, and the county representing all the other communities within the county. We wanted to make sure we had equal representation on any kind of funding committee. So the agreement as written now, through, again, some working with the county staff, would provide for 3 voting members of that consortium. That includes a representative from Layton City, Clearfield City, and the county, 1 each. And then there could be some potentially non-voting members that could provide some advisement. That could be staff from the various organizations, could be housing advocates, others that could provide expertise on what some of the pressing issues are in the community. So that was issue number 1, was to make sure that we have good equal representation on the funding committee. Issue number 2 has to do with these priorities. We wanted to put, and this is my term, we wanted to put some guardrails, though. We wanted to put some guidelines for what we would expect that Davis County, as the administrator of this funding, that's another important point, is that Davis County has agreed to administer this program on behalf of the consortium, which is it's a positive thing. That would take that administrative burden and place that on the county. But we wanted to make sure that we knew, as a consortium member, what types of activities could potentially be funded by this program. So this was an effort to try to quantify what those would be. You can see that all of these activities would potentially have a positive impact on Layton City. We do have deed-restricted multifamily projects within the city right now, a number of those that could be potentially re-syndicated. I can go into that if you'd like, but that's a process by which those deed-restricted housing units are kept as deed-restricted housing units over the long term. So that's one that we think would be potentially a benefit to Layton City. All of these others, again, are good programs. Again, there is some overlap with our CDBG program on some of these. This is additional funding, though, if we weren't clear about this. This is additional funding that could be available should the consortium be entered into for expenditure within Davis County. And I will say, the reason for some of these priorities and the reason we wanted to identify those is that things have changed a little bit from our initial conversations with the county about how this would be used. I think the county has asked us to take maybe a little more global view of this, and that we want to make sure we're funding the best projects that can have the biggest benefits for all members of the community, the county in particular. That would include Layton City, so that's not exclusive of Layton City, but that potentially you could have funding for projects that were countywide projects, or that were maybe in another community that had good impacts for the entire population of the county in terms of providing for affordable housing. So we can see the worth of that, we can see the value of that approach, but again, if we're going to take that approach, if it's not going to just simply be a percentage allocation to each of the participating communities, we want to make sure that our community has a proportional vote, equal representation on those communities, or excuse me, on those recommendations. So the last thing I want to mention is that we wanted to make sure that these priorities, if adopted through this interlocal agreement, would be the priorities, and that the only way that you would have those changed would be through unanimous agreement by that funding committee. That's that consortium committee. So that's piece number 1, is we can't change those priorities without unanimous consent of those consortium recommending committee members. Piece number 2 is we also put that guardrail of that the county commission themselves, as they're making the funding decisions, and they would be the ones making the ultimate funding decision, cannot vary from these priorities without, again, unanimous approval, unanimous consent from each of those consortium members. So there's a little bit of a distinction there. So I want to make sure that we want to make sure that we were covered in both cases, that we can't change the priorities themselves from a committee standpoint, and we also can't have a vote on something that doesn't fall within these priorities without that unanimous consent from all members of the consortium. What that does is it gives an opportunity, if there's a really good project, of course we'd want to support it, right? Layton City is not saying we wouldn't be supportive of that. We want to support that project, but we want to make sure that we have input to making any change that may change these priorities. So with that, we have, again, we've worked very closely with county staff for the last several weeks. We are recommending that the council consider this adoption of this consortium and this interlocal agreement that would establish this consortium, and be happy to answer any questions.
You're recommending that we do?
Based on those changes that we have, yeah, we recommend.
How many people are in this? And I know you say county, does that mean individual city? or the county is represented by an individual?
The county gets one vote on that committee.
Okay.
We would get one vote
And Clearfield will get a vote, and then what about the three amigos? The commission?
The
So the
advisory
funding-
non-voting?
So, yeah,
No,
well,
he's
the
talking about the
funding,
commissioners.
Commissioner.
the commission,
Commissioners.
yeah, the commission, the way this is set up, the commission would have, there has to be a lead jurisdiction, so the commission would function as that lead jurisdiction.
Oh, okay.
They would be voting on this, but the votes would be based on funding recommendations from these priorities.
From these programs.
But it's only one commissioner that sits on the voting committee. Because if there's only three
On the funding committee.
on the
that's right.
funding
Yeah.
On the fund, yeah, but then the three make the.
yeah.
So
We-
they
We've
would-
made our representative someone that's appointed by
No, they
the
would
council.
say yes.
Oh, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, I'm trying to clarify and understand based on Dave's question. So one representative from the county, which would be one of the commissioners presumably, with someone from Layton City and someone from Clearfield would be on this consortium. That consortium would then make recommendations to the commissioners and then they would vote on.
That's correct. Yeah, the commission would have the final vote on that as far as the funding goes. That is a requirement of this type of consortium, that there has to be a lead jurisdiction, and the county has proposed that they be that lead jurisdiction. Again, there are benefits to having the county do that to the city as well, because they would be in charge of all the administration, the paperwork, all the things that have to be filed with HUD.
Right.
That's
But that
pretty
does,
cumbersome.
the trade-off is that they would be the one that would make the final decision. So that's why this was so important to us, why we spent several weeks in negotiation back and forth with the county to make sure that we felt comfortable that we had representation and, again, what I call guardrails, these things that tell us what can and can't be funded.
Can.
But the original suggestions, which was fine, was to have that, it essentially basically said that the county commission was the ultimate decider regardless of what the committee recommended. In our past experience, felt like that wouldn't work in our situation. Also, why don't you speak, Chad, to the timing of it, the term of the contract would be entering into, and
Yeah, we in the interlocal agreement, it sets up, now there are some minimums, again, that are set forward by HUD. We have to, if we enter into this, we have to stay in this consortium for at least 2 years. So the term of the agreement right now is 2 years. And at that point, if we can reevaluate whether or not we feel like this is an appropriate organization or a consortium to stay in or not. I think there has been some discussion by the county about the next term, if we decide to stay in again, would be a little bit longer. I think our recommendation would be maybe to keep that a little bit short so that we can have that
Right.
each, have that check-in every couple of
Make sure
years.
it works.
Making sure that we're all still on the same page, making sure that if we have to make changes to these priorities, that we can do that, but still have the ability to reanalyze every couple to few years.
How much are we thinking the funding would be for?
So the county estimates about $600,000, is that about right?
About 545 annually
$545.
and 750 in the first year. To meet the minimum for that first year, the state's actually agreed to provide the county roughly $200,000 to get us to where we need to initialize the consortium. And then it's that recurring funding stream that's going to be 545.
I have a number.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
So, a couple of things. So, when we're talking about the consortium, right, Urban County, the county, represents 13 cities. So it's not just the county. We are representing 13 cities. Layton and Clearfield are their own entitlement communities based on population. So we're representing 13 cities on top of Layton and Clearfield. This is really to move the needle when it comes to affordable housing. When you talk about preservation, right, we have 2,000 units that are deed restricted in Davis County as a whole. That's less than 1% of our total population at 673,000 residents. So we're talking large picture projects when it comes to kind of what you said, Councilwoman, on prevention, right? When we're talking prevention, when it comes to affordable housing, these are initiatives we want to see other communities, not just Layton and Clearfield, doing affordable housing initiatives. We want to see all 15 cities being able to have access to move the needle when it comes to affordable housing. So our children have a place to live in Davis County.
So I have a couple of questions. Along those lines, is there another consortium already that is formed with these other cities?
There's an agreement, I'll let the county add to this as well, there's an agreement with those other cities for Davis County to represent them as part of the urban county program, but there's not another consortium.
And they can't participate unless Layton and/or Clearfield participates, correct?
Correct. So all of us, as a whole, representing all 15 cities, we need to participate.
Oh, you got a series.
Go for it.
A series of questions.
So just,
Go for it.
Just to clarify,
Yeah.
this doesn't affect participation in the other CDBG program. Now, there's a CDBG program that's administered by the county on behalf of those other cities. We have our own CDBG programs with the city. We're an entitlement community, as is Davis County, so that doesn't impact that ability.
Yeah. So does that mean that the county then would also be able to apply for the funding? So if we have this consortium and there's this pot of money, Layton can say, oh, we have a project, we want to apply for the money for this project. Clearfield can do the same, but then the county can also apply on behalf of the other cities in the county,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And for us specifically, if this is something that we were to do, does that mean that some of our CDBG funding that we currently use toward housing, we could then maybe use that towards some of the other initiatives in the CDBG realm? I'm thinking namely like youth court, whose funding's been cut by, $1,000, seems like every other year.
So unfortunately, with youth court and our other public service providers, we have a cap on how much we can contribute to that with our budget every year. So every year we get an X amount from HUD, and then only 15% of that can go to our public service providers like youth court, unfortunately.
So within
Right,
that
so-
15%, we can allocate to different users. We've got several, safe harbor others that amount doesn't change.
Right, okay, so the housing portion of that is outside of the 15%.
And each of these priorities, these are the kind of things that home can be spent on up here on the list. And you'll notice they're all very, very focused on home ownership, home buyer assistance, those kind of things. It's all about housing.
Okay, and I just have a few more and then I'm gonna stop. Promise, 'cause
No,
I
don't
know
look at
it's
me,
got-
we're good.
We got
So-
We got all night.
So, with regard to assistance, one of the things that has been a super big concern of mine, as some other members of the council, is we talked about, housing assistance, and you've got these big development projects up here, single, multifamily, deed restrictions, et cetera. Can any of that money go towards, like, directly to the home buyer? I see there's a couple of lines there, direct home buyer assistance and tenant-based rental assistance. But when we're talking about projects 1 through 3, that money's gonna generally go to the developer, is that correct?
Yeah, each of these are geared towards making the housing more affordable. Some of them are more homeowner driven, like you're saying. Some of them are more towards the project itself. I think, you can see number 6 through 8. Those are kind of your direct home buyer assistance. Those would be things like down payment assistance. These, number 7 would be, just like it says, it'd be repair and rehabilitation of existing units to keep somebody in their affordable home. Then the last one is what Morgan talked about, which kind of is what piqued our interest in this program to begin with, which is tenant-based rental assistance, and that goes directly to the tenant. But each of these, with the tenant-based rental assistance, they're paying the landlord, of course, so that's going to also eventually go to that person that they're renting from. Each of these other ones, when we look at that re-syndication, these are affordable homes. They're truly affordable. That's one thing about home is it has to be, it's limited to truly low to moderate income folks as far as the HUD definition of that. So this would be going to someone that is truly in an affordable unit. So, and we have several of these in Layton City. Stonehenge is on my mind. That's not Stonehenge. It's one of those that's a deed restricted project. There are others that provide truly affordable. It's subsidized, so that's the reason why when we say re-syndication, that's creating a situation where those would continue to be subsidized to continue affordability. So to answer your question, yeah, there's some of these that would go more directly towards like the down payment assistance and those kind of things, and some that would be more split between helping the homeowner through subsidies to the developer, the owner of the project.
And so these funds that can be applied for would be to continue a deed restriction like 1 and 2, making sure that the cost of the home to the buyer or the rent or whatever it is stays at a certain level so they can afford it.
That's right.
And then you said that these are proposed changes that the city staff has put forth towards the county. Has the county agreed to these already?
Yeah, these priorities are what we've agreed to. The other changes I described are also changes they've agreed to. We have, should the council decide they want to go forward, we have a couple other little clarifying changes that we can bring up that we'd want to have included as well.
So with just a clarification question, Chad, I'm sorry, were you?
Yeah, I think I'm done.
On the first item, one of the questions we had asked internally, I don't know if the county responded to it or we found the answer, but based on the data that came from the county, the list of potential projects to be resyndicated, some of those resyndication dates or approval dates were well out into the future,
Correct.
sometimes 40, 50, 60 years out. So if a program, if a project has already been resyndicated once through a HUD process that approved them, what is the actual risk of them dropping off? And why wouldn't they, if you've already been qualified for the last 50 years under a HUD program, why wouldn't HUD continue that program? Why would this money be used to resyndicate something that has established relationship with HUD, if that's the idea?
So when it comes to LIHTC projects or deed restricted projects, right, they usually have like a maximum term. So anywhere from 20, you're now seeing them up towards 100 years of being deed restricted. So it's a lot easier for us to preserve those units rather than build new. And so Layton City actually has a project that's coming up, I think 2026?
26, I believe.
Yeah, where there's, I think, close to 200 units that will no longer be deed restricted.
Let me try to ask that again. Maybe I'm asking it well. If I'm a owner of a
Correct.
low income project, and I have previously for the last 30, 40 years, so many would be a perfect example of this, I've had a relationship that's been approved by HUD, and I'm a proven quantity in this, what would be the scenario under which HUD would suddenly say, you've been a good partner for the last 50 years, we're going to stop that partnership, and so you need to go get the money to resyndicate through the county. I mean, I wonder if, is this money, if we're refunding, if we're using this money to resyndicate, do the work of the owner, if you will, is that a good use of the money? And I'm not saying that's what is anticipated, but that's the question. When I looked at the spreadsheets, these things are well out in the future, and I can't imagine HUD would say, hey, you've been a great partner for the last 50 years, but now we're going to sever that. So I hope the county or the consortium isn't stepping in to fill a gap that doesn't need to be filled, and then we're focusing money on filling gaps that do need to be filled.
Right.
And just don't make it, yeah. I'm not asking that very well, but that's the question.
So I can speak to that. It's not necessarily that their relationship with HUD, and it's HUD deciding we're no longer going to resyndicate. It's the owner of these properties that have had income restricted units for 30, 40, 50 years, and now they can charge market rent on these units. So it's leveraging these funds to either deed restrict them further or acquire these properties to ensure affordability down the line, because once you put home dollars into a project, whether it's direct home buyer assistance, tenant-based rental assistance, or property acquisition, comes an inherent affordability period. And if we can leverage these funds to acquire these properties, then we can deed restrict them past that affordability period and really maximize the affordability threshold for these funds and for these units that we're set to lose for low-income families.
So you're saying that they're used to buy the units with this money?
Yeah, so if you want to talk about the preservation fund that Ivory has.
Yeah, so the state has allocated, I believe, $10 million to the Utah Housing Preservation Fund, and what they've been tasked to do is to acquire, rehab, and maintain, kind of in this same vein of expiring deed restricted properties all across the state. They haven't participated in Davis County yet, but they have ample funding available to participate and acquire projects for expiring deed restricted units. And we've approached them as the county to kind of start these discussions on what a partnership might look like. My understanding is they've still got ample funding available, and they also have additional resources through members of their board, one of which is the president of the Ivory Company, and they're leveraging those funds, doing this type of work across the state. They just haven't done it in our neck of the woods yet. This funding stream would go really far in helping start making that happen.
So and I just want to talk, this is such a small dollar amount, right? When you're talking $500,000, right? Like, that's not going to be able to move the needle. We're going to need a lot of different partners, whether it's the preservation fund, whether it's somebody actually applying for a LIHTC project. They're going to have to come in, and minimum is 25%, right? They have to match whatever at 25%. And so this is just a way for us to leverage large type projects that can really move the needle on affordability.
So can you speak to, you also have up here the home buyer assistance program, which the county already has one,
Correct.
Layton City has one. So there's two avenues that people can go through, and you're saying that they could also utilize this fund, so it gives them 3 avenues, or not?
It's kind of just like if we opt, if the voting funding committee opts to make that a priority in a funding cycle and fund either an existing homeownership assistance program like the one that I administer for the county, or start a new one that has a different purpose, different policies and procedures, different amount, threshold, it's an option.
So really, these are almost directly pulled from HUD's language on home, right? Like, we kind of broke them out a little bit more, but these really are what we're allowed to do with this funding. Like, there can be, we don't have much flexibility, it's really those 8 items right there.
Okay, I'm gonna ask the question, because I know that it's a problem with the existing program, and that is meeting the threshold or the qualification level for that funding. How does this come into play with this particular pot of money? Because
As far as like the
'cause like-
threshold requirements, are they the same as like say CDBG for the program you guys administer?
Yeah, and your program,
Yeah,
because
so-
right now, I know that it's tough for anybody to even qualify for it.
Yeah, and the biggest struggle is the income limits, right? Just
Right.
relative to the cost of housing. And what we've seen in the county is the program we administer is up to 50,000. And I'll speak to this, it's taking just about every dollar of that to get people to qualify if they can to begin with. As far as I'm aware, that there's nothing that would preclude us from setting the amount of assistance higher, but when we're working with 550,000 a year, it might not be the most efficient thing to do for that priority. But I mean, it works, it's just, it's harder when you're talking high cost of housing and low income folks for the purchase of homes.
And I just want to say, so we've hit $1 million that we've actually lent out in our homeownership assistance program. So, like, if we are moving the needle, I would say average price of purchase is $368.
Like 370-ish?
Yeah.
I guess I have one more. I'm just gonna reiterate. So this list here does not include homeless shelter.
No, there's nothing within homeless that we can do besides LIHTC, so deed restricted housing units, that's it.
And
That
that would
was-
count as homeless, like that could count as a homeless shelter because.
Not currently in the language, under any of HB 499, 121, 421. No, they won't count any of those as beds.
That was partially my question as well, because when I was doing some research on the partnership program, this is from the actual Department of Housing and Urban Development guide on this. It says, home is the primary federal tool of states and local governments for the production of affordable rental and owner-occupied housing for low-income to extremely low-income families, including mixed-income housing and housing for homeless. And so I was concerned that language that says that's literally in the intro to this program, but I didn't see it on here. So I'm guessing that may have been some discussions that you had in terms of our worry with
Yeah, I mean, that's why.
having this, and having it be some sort of, our residents are very worried about a homeless shelter being put in Layton. We hear that all the time. And I want to ask the question, is this a vehicle to allow that to happen?
I think that's why the priorities that you see there are the ones that we've agreed to.
And that you
We
can't
also
change them.
We also don't see that, and that's why we've agreed to that. You don't, as far as we can tell, none of these would allow for that to be through this priority cycle. Now, again, there is the ability for those priorities to be changed through unanimous approval, but that's, or through, if we decide after 2 years we want to continue this agreement, that would be another time we could reset those priorities, right? But yeah, that's our understanding as well, is that these 8 priorities would not include money toward homeless.
I mean, to be completely transparent, in the original draft we got, there was an additional statement in there, and just recently one was inserted back, which we, from the staff level, said needs to go out, was at number 9 that essentially said, or any other project approved by, we're not saying that was the idea, but we pushed it back through Ken and said, no, what is that? Well, any other project approved by HUD. And so we didn't, I didn't know that was in there, we didn't, what you just read, but, so.
Yeah, I mean, we deal with funding, so this seems to me more similar to CDBG, which we really enjoy. CDBG's been a great program for us. Morgan, you do a really good job with CDBG. We like the meetings every year. You can see the public service sector come in and show all the amazing things they've done with the funds. And again, this is just about $125,000, a little bit more than what we deal with CDBG. It's just, with CDBG, it's just us, right? So we have it in this room, we decide where it goes, we're the final say. And so it's just the discussion that we're having, I think is a good one, and just to make sure that you know, there isn't, I'd say ulterior motives, I don't really mean it like that, but there isn't some maybe consequences or alternatives that we wouldn't do in our own city, that we're signing up basically as a consortium where you need us because we can co-sign on this loan with you, right? But in the end, maybe all of the funding is actually done in all the other cities. And so really it's just they need us to sign on the dotted line. So it seems a little strange in that way. I haven't seen one of these come up since I've been on the council anyway. But I'm not necessarily opposed to it offhand if this is what we're talking about. And I think, thank you for doing the due diligence on this to kind of outline where we want it, because the last question I had for you, Morgan, was, maybe I may be misremembering this, but a lot of the discussion that we have when we talk about CDBG with direct home buyer assistance, home or owner-occupied rehabilitation, we haven't really done any of the tenant-based rental assistance as much, but don't we have a difficult time getting people to take us up on those things?
Recently, we haven't had nearly as many down payment assistance applications just because the interest rates are so high, inflation and other things that are going on right now. That's the feedback I've been getting.
Yeah. Okay, because I mean, I think to Councilmember Smith-Evanson's point, I think we like the bottom ones more, but those are the ones we have difficult times getting people to take advantage of. So, interesting. Okay, thank you.
My concern, and forgive us for being, a little gun shy, is we've been going through I see this and I think unintended consequences. I think that this is a great idea now, and then you have a board and another board, and yes, we have a seat, but we're not really voting on funding. Once again, I feel like we're being, hey, we need you to co-sign on this so that we can take care of this. And by the way, you got to do it tonight. I think that's what's going on here. And so my concern, we're dealing with something similar with, I feel, with Wasatch Integrated, in that Layton City is the biggest city in the county, and you need the volume. And in this instance, who knows what we get from this? I mean, you've done your best. I thank you for negotiating. But you've been negotiating on your behalf to see if it's even palatable for you. This is the group that gets to decide, and we haven't even had a chance to, I haven't even seen this until tonight, and it has to be voted on tonight. Or you don't get to apply for another year. Sorry,
about the pressure, but I feel like there's unintended consequences with this, and this stuff is great, but it still seems vague to me how this would work, and the money's not even a lot, and it's only 2 years. It just doesn't seem like something that we should be doing, so just
Are you okay?
my 2 cents.
Are you okay if Dakota, I think he raised his hand, are you okay?
Sure.
He wants to respond to that, so. go
Yeah, if I
ahead,
could just
Dakota.
speak to that a little bit. Part of the reason why we're asking Layton City to jump on this consortium is it's a formula allocation grant, which, as we've talked about, there's a minimum for us to qualify. But it's really, if Layton, Clearfield, and the entirety of the county do not sign on this agreement, everybody gets no money. And it's crucial in that regard because it's increasing not just the money coming to the county, but the state as a whole for affordable housing, because it's a formula block grant, like CDBG is really a sister program. There's minimums that each state is awarded each year by HUD, and by us becoming consortium, it adjusts the formula. The state gets a little less, but we get more, and the all-encompassing amount brings more for affordable housing to the state in the midst of our greatest housing crisis. I'll speak as a Clearfield City Council member. We've had a lot of the same reservations that you guys have raised here tonight. Ultimately, though, we decided this is such a net benefit for our community at large. Although it's a small dollar amount, it's still more that's coming for a really direct purpose. And that's the plea I'll make to you guys here tonight. The HUD has pretty stringent deadlines as to when this agreement has to get to them in order for them to consider it for us to be designated as what's called a participating jurisdiction. That deadline is June 30th. I apologize that you're getting short notice for consideration on this agreement. Like Morgan said, we've been in discussion on this for about 7 months now. Timing obviously is not perfect, but neither of those
Clearfield approved it?
we are voting on it on Tuesday, but we have unanimous consent from our last work session.
Mark, just one, can I ask one question on that?
Sure.
So you need the cities without the county, I mean, the county encompasses all of us. So is it there like land use things or what is it?
It's kind of semantics almost, because when we're talking the county, like Chanel said, it's the urban county.
Okay.
And because we administer CDBG for the rest of the cities, we're designated in HUD's eyes as what's called the urban county.
Okay.
So the county, in this essence, is 13 cities. You guys are one, Clearfield's one, is entitlement communities.
County of Layton?
Yes.
Yeah. And I just want to say too, there is no risk for Layton City, right? The risk when it comes to like, if anything goes wrong with any of these projects, guess who that falls back to? The county, right? So if somebody doesn't follow lead-based paint, if somebody doesn't follow the environmental reviews, right? If somebody doesn't have a contractor that is SAM.gov registered, right? Those risks all fall to the county. There is no risk for Layton City. So I just want to say that. I also want to say, born and raised Layton City resident, E.G. King, Central Davis, Layton High. My son is at Heritage and going to Shoreline. So like, I mean, I'm Layton through and through. So just want to throw that out there.
So is it, do I understand correctly that this program, there's an opportunity to get involved every year? It's a once-a-year election, right? So if it's not approved by all the entities this year, it can be approved next year?
Theoretically, so it's a formula allocation. It's got all these different facets to it, assuming, and I don't think anything would change next year, the year after that, that those demographics would help us meet the minimum, then we could consider it in future years, but it's harder to dig yourself out of a hole if it's raining, is the analogy I want to make.
I guess the point I was going to, and again, I'm not, this is a city council decision, as they well indicated, but given, not given the questions, but there are questions. As a complex program. So, at least the staff's perspective has been to try to get answers to the questions, just try to understand it, not to form an opinion it's good or bad or different, but just try to understand it. It seems to me the only thing worse, and I'm not suggesting that's where we're at, but the only thing worse than not going forward, not having all the questions answered, is to go forward with all the questions not having been answered. And then 2 years down the road, once the appetite for these funds is out there, then the city, Layton City or Clearfield City, pulls out of it and says, this in no way turned out the way that we all anticipated, right? The verbal representations were this, and again, we have experience with that. Then that puts a tremendous, I'm not saying it would happen, that puts a tremendous pressure on those cities to stay in even though they're not happy with the program, because you'll have started something that's hard to pull out of. Does that make sense? So I'm not saying that's the situation, but I think some of the council members' questions go to that point. I've been around long enough, and you guys probably have too, to know that at the front end, it's easy to say all these things will work out, but people change, circumstances change, politics change, and things that once everybody thought were going to work out really well don't work out. And then you have to go to the documents to find it out, and that's where it gets really messy because nobody put a structure around it. We appreciate the county's willingness to try to create a structure that, if it's adopted, can have lasting value, because it will be a train wreck otherwise. So that's just an editorial comment, but that's been the mindset of the staff as we've tried to get additional information, and again, the county's been good to try to help us understand that. But
Okay, Zach, do you have one last question? Because
I've got a
it's
question.
3 minutes
Go
too.
ahead. No, I've still,
Okay,
Joy, can I just say one thing? So to Alex's, oh, I'm so sorry.
hang on.
Sorry.
I want to acknowledge my council
Councilmember.
member
Go ahead.
first.
So sorry,
That's okay.
Councilmember.
Go ahead. Glenn.
in your research, are there any of these consortiums in the state of Utah? Any others? Any other cities?
There are two.
Salt Lake.
Not that I was able to locate, no.
Salt Lake.
Does Salt Lake have one?
Salt Lake and Provo.
Provo. Yes.
And how do they function?
They have functioned for 30 years each since the inception of this program. They just met the minimums independently once they rolled this out in 1992. My understanding is that they have been operating pretty seamlessly, kind of like you see with CDBG in your own city. It's just that housing directed focus.
Let me clarify those. So are those consortiums or just?
They're-
districts,
they are.
or- So who is the consortium with the?
For Provo, it's Provo City is the lead entity, Utah County, and Orange City.
Are they CDBG or home?
Home.
They're home?
Yep.
And then Salt Lake County leads out on their home consortium.
And as you read, and I imagine you have read through this agreement, it's largely drafted with Provo's framework in mind. It's stuff that already works, it's language that's already been approved by HUD. So there's a baseline in the state of Utah for how this works and what it can do.
And I do just want to say to Alex's point, if this is okay,
Yes.
council member. So what happens if we don't approve it, right? So we did go to the state, we went to the Olin Walker Housing Board. The minimum threshold for us to start is $750,000. We don't meet that threshold right now with all of our 15 cities, including Layton. We still only have 550,000. So we went to the state and said, we need your home money in order for us to qualify. And the state said, this is better as a state as a whole for us to get more funding when it comes to affordable housing. We'll give you the money to make up that gap. So that's already been approved and signed off by the state of Utah.
And there's no guarantee that they will make that agreement in the future.
Correct.
I think they put a lot of trust in that we
You
can
guys okay to continue
accomplish
this on
this.
there? Okay. All right, well, I'm gonna say thank you. This has been a good discussion. I think we've got a lot of information here. However, I'm gonna call for our work meeting to close so that we can go into our regularly scheduled council meeting and we can continue the discussion there. Okay. So with that,
I make a motion, we close.
Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
on time, as close to time as I can. You good, Kim? You're good? Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone out to our Layton City Council meeting this evening. The date is June 20th of 2024. Council, we have 3 sets of minutes here that need to be approved. I'm not sure. Oh, excuse me, yes. Okay. Let me back up here. So once again, I want to welcome everyone out to our Layton City Council meeting, and we appreciate those that are here in attendance. As customary, we like to start our meeting with a prayer and a pledge, and we take turns each month. And this month, Councilmember Roberts is going to lead us in that, so I'll turn the time over to him.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'll offer a prayer and then invite everyone to stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Our dear Heavenly Father, we're grateful, Father, for this time to gather together as leaders and residents of this great city of Layton. We're grateful, Father, for so many blessings in our lives that lead us to this place this evening. We're grateful, Father, for all the people that work so hard to make Layton a great place to live, a great place to work, and a great place to recreate. Father, we ask thy blessing to be upon the employees of this city, the first responders, all those who make this city function every day. I'm grateful for their service and their dedication. Father, we're grateful for the opportunity this night to make decisions to continue that great way of life in this city. I'm grateful for those who sacrifice their time to be here and to help these things come about. Father, we pray for thy guidance this day and always as we go about, that we will be good citizens and represent thee well in our interactions with all those we come in contact with. We ask this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please rise and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you very much, Councilmember Roberts. Okay, Council, as I mentioned, we do have 3 sets of minutes that need to be approved here. If you have any changes or corrections, please make it known. Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to accept them as written.
Mayor, I make a motion that we accept the minutes from the Layton City Council work meeting April 4th, 2024, the Layton City Council meeting May 20th, May 2nd, 2024, and the minutes of the Layton City Council work meeting May 16th, 2024.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, it's been moved and second that we adopt the minutes as written. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to our municipal announcements. I know that there'll be a lot of interesting ones and exciting ones. So, who wants to start first? Go ahead.
Mayor, it's a great time of year, being summer, and just 2 weeks, couple weeks from now, we'll be celebrating the birth of this country. And great time. It's always a good time here in Layton City. Parks and Recreation Department have been working tirelessly for months and probably since last July 5th. So we appreciate the work of the city department. A full schedule on the 4th, starting with breakfast, thanks to the Rotarians of the city. Is that correct, Mayor?
Yeah, the Rotarians will be doing it in the Valley.
Breakfast here at Kinley Amphitheater. Lots of activities all day long. You can go to laytoncity.org in the recreation, click on events, and there's a page for Liberty Days, which will show all of the events all day long. In addition to that, a week from this Sunday night here at the amphitheater next to the city offices here, we'll have the Voices of Liberty concert where we will honor the hometown heroes here in Layton City. So we encourage all to attend. We'll have a great evening with patriotic music and honor the heroes that really worked hard to make Layton great. So, thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else have any announcements they'd like to share? Okay, I think in addition to that, I did ask our Parks and Rec, and there are still opportunities if anybody would like to submit a float for the parade. They would welcome that. And so just go ahead and contact their office and they can give you the parameters for it. So thank you. Okay, we don't have any verbal petitions tonight, so I'd like to move on to our citizens' comment portion of our meeting. So if anyone in the audience would like to address this governing body, you're more than welcome to. We ask you to step up to the podium and state your name. And if it's an item that's on our public hearing, you're welcome to wait until that time and speak to those items. But if it's something different that's not on the agenda, then certainly we'd like to hear from you. So go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name is Claude Young, 1198 North, 100 East, resident for 26 years in Layton. My side street is 100 East, the southern one, where it connects 1150 West, 1150 North, and 1250 North. This seems to be a speedway, a cutoff for people coming through there. And I would just like to ask or request that we have the speed limit trailer, the radar trailer, put up there as a reminder. I make motions, people coming by, and I get the single finger salute, and it's just ignored. But I'm right in the middle of the block, so I get it going both ways. And there are kids that are playing in the streets now on bicycles and skateboards and everything in the middle of the street. So this is a safety issue. So I'd like to request that we get that trailer set there for a while. If for nothing else, a police officer to even an empty car sitting there would be a deterrent. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that's exactly the purpose of why we have that trailer, so that we can move it around, because unfortunately throughout the entire city, this is an issue, but it does help. So I just want to make sure that you captured the address. City Manager Alex, did you? Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else? Okay. If not, let's go ahead and go down to our consent items. We have 4 different consent items here tonight, and typically we can present all items and act on them in a single motion by the council. But should there be any topics that you want to pull out of this consent item, council, I'd welcome that. Or otherwise, we'll go ahead and proceed with the agenda as written.
Madam Mayor, I'd move that we pull item C, resolution 24-22 for the interlocal cooperation agreement out of the consent items, just so that we can have some time on that one separately.
Okay, very good. I'll acknowledge that. Okay, let's go ahead then and proceed with item number A, which Tracy will be presenting this item, which has to do with amend our title.
Yes.
amend Title 3, Chapter 15 of the Layton City Municipal Code. Sorry.
Thank you for
Go
introducing that, Mayor. Ordinance 24-18. We reviewed this briefly in the work session, and just for the public's knowledge, I've consolidated that down just a little bit. And so some of the fees that the city charges for different things that are proposed to be changed, We could review those briefly. Event security for uniformed officers, increase in that fee. Also, there's a fee for inspection in the urban interface area, which is under fire, wildland urban interface. And so $75 per lot in order for that inspection to occur. And also fees that mostly fall on development when there's a large structure, as our assistant fire chief indicated, over 200,000 square feet or over 6 stories. Those structures are now required by fire code to put in breathing systems so that their air tanks can be recharged in different places in the building. And so inspection of those related to development, there are some fees that will be added to those, and also inspection of those systems. We've also proposed to add a new fee for the reservation and rental of the Layton Commons round pavilion, the new one that's out front there in the park, for both the summer and winter. Different fees proposed in those time frames. And in our water department, the fees for water meters, which again are paid with a building permit, those have increased, and so we needed to indicate that in our fee schedule. Probably one of the main ones that the citizens would want to know about is an increase in our sanitary sewer rates. And so as indicated by the master plan and impact and the fee study, those rates needed to increase for this year by 8.2%. So that the citizens are also aware that study also proposed increases for the next 2 years, which was decided upon, but we are going to monitor those and take them a year at a time. And so for this year, effective July 1, there's an 8.2% increase in the sewer rate, which for most people, that will mean it goes from $29.45 to $31.86. There are fees related to churches, schools, commercial buildings, hotels that are on a per thousand rate also, and that also increases 8.2%. The final fees that are increased are also related to development. When developers put in a subdivision, streets, so forth, there's lighting requirements and standards in the city, and we have development pay for those fixtures, and then they are installed by our contractors so that there's uniformity throughout the city. And those fees for the different lighting fixtures have increased, and so those are included in the schedule. Those are the fees that are proposed to be changed effective July 1st. Are there any questions related to that?
Hey, council, do you have any questions? I've got one that I'm going to ask, and it's regarding the lighting, knowing that, we've had concerns with residents as far as the illumination and the spread of the light pollution and that. So going forward, we are recommending that they're more of the, I'm not even sure what the technical name is for the lights that we're using. They're more downward projected, right? So that it's known that we have made that change and that we are doing that for new lighting going forward.
Yeah, there's different gradations of that.
Yeah.
We're talking about dark skies.
Yes.
Technology, and we do use that. There are various opinions about what level of dark skies, but what our position has been historically in the city is to try to strike an appropriate balance between being sensitive to those light issues, light pollution, but at the same time meeting the objective of the lights, which is to provide safety and navigability, if you will, as people are trying to find addresses and so forth. So there's a balance that we try to strike, but yeah, we try to direct them downward, not outward. And
right.
Yeah. But,
okay. Thank you. Okay. Council, does anybody have any questions?
Question.
Sure.
We have Chief Mons here. Just a question about the FAR system. I know we were one of the first cities to do this. Has there been any other cities that have?
Not to my knowledge in the state yet. We've had a lot of inquiries from other departments. They've taken our language and they've taken our recommendations. If I remember right, the national one was 500,000 square feet. And we talked about that as a staff and things like that. There were not a lot of places where a building that size would fit. And the difference for us is, yeah, it's a big building, but 250 was where we put our thing because that's still an enormous thing. And if I remember right, there's the first one that's been approved is the new Smith's thing.
Yeah.
Where
Just for our sake of the folks that are listening online, can you just kind of explain what we're talking about here, this has to do with the fire safety quickly?
Okay, it's an air replenishment system that it's remote, and in buildings that are over 250,000 square feet or 6 stories in height is going to require one of these systems to be placed in. It's a system that's very similar to what we have in our fire stations to fill our SCBA bottles that we put on our backs, and so this system would have to be maintained and inspected, which is what they're talking about here, annually, just like ours do. And what that does is that if we get ourselves in trouble, if there's a collapse or we get into a building and we have some rapid fire deterioration, conditions that deteriorate really quickly, that we have a safe haven real quick that we can hook into, refill our bottles to then give us more time to get out, or you can sit right there and let the rest of the team come get you. So that's what they're there for, is for that. And when you get into that size of building, it's a safety feature for us. We'd never want to put ourselves that far in, but in case you get to that point, that's what it's there for. And then also for the height of the buildings, the 6 stories, you don't want to have to lug all your air 5 stories up so you can fight a fire on the sixth floor of a building, because that's manpower intensive, where you can just reach over, hook up, refill, and go back to work.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's good, and I appreciate that question, Councilmember Morris. And I think what he's really trying to point out here is that Layton knows how to lead out on the importance of safety. So thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
If there aren't any further questions, I would just recommend that we adopt ordinance 2418. Thank you.
Okay. All right, that's item number A on our consent items. We'll go ahead and go on to item number B, which Ms. Joellen Grandy is going to present that item, and it's an agreement between Layton City and the state of Utah with the Utah Outdoor Recreation Grant. I'm stalling here. For the new Case Creek Trail pedestrian overpass here in Layton. And I just am going to give a quick shout out right now that Joellen presented to the Wasatch Front Regional Council today and did an excellent job. And it was very much appreciative of, once again, showing the lead that Layton has in taking a proactive position on opportunities. So Joellen, go ahead and present it.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I have the pleasure of introducing Resolution 2421. On March 15, 2024, Layton submitted a grant proposal through the state of Utah's Utah Outdoor Recreation Grant, requesting funds to help construct the Case Creek Trail pedestrian overpass, which is proposed to span the width of the Union Pacific and Frontrunner Railway corridor and touch down immediately next to the Frontrunner station. This overpass proposed will connect the east and west alignment of the Case Creek Trail to the Frontrunner station and the downtown area of Layton. On April 29th of 2024, the city was notified that they had been awarded $750,000 through the Utah Outdoor Recreation Grant. A physical assistance agreement has been issued by the state of Utah to formalize the awarded monies. This resolution, if passed, will authorize the execution of an agreement between Layton City and the state of Utah for funding assistance with the construction of the Case Creek Trail pedestrian overpass. I do have a couple of slides that are just illustrative for us to be able to view. This is a progressive drawing that we've been working with our consultants, Kimley Horn, on. You can see on the east side, the trail goes up to some stairs and an elevator, which would cross over the railway and then land over on the west side, where there'd be an elevator option and stairs as well. As of today, this is our funding that we've been able to gather. External funds of almost $8.5 million and internal funds of $505 for a total of $9,059,160. Staff recommends the council adopt Resolution 2421, authorizing the city manager to conduct negotiations and execute the agreement between Layton City and the state of Utah for funding assistance with the construction of Case Creek Trail pedestrian overpass. Are there any questions?
Have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but we just always like to see this, where there's collaboration with state and other entities, or we can access grants that will, fund things that are going to help the residents of our city. And this is just one of those that you all continue to do. So thank you and keep up the good work.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hey, Joellen, before you step away, do you want to speak to the fact that in addition to the elevator, the stairs, but on the side of the stairs, you have the nice little track for the bicycles? You want to explain that? Kind of like the track where the bicycle tires will sit in the track so you can go up, walk up the stairs in case you're really that into activity.
Yes,
physical health.
I apologize. We have a conceptual rendering of what it will look like with the stairs that you see here on this drawing. There's the option of riding the elevator up if you'd like to with your bike, but if you don't, it's called a rundle. And basically it's just on the side of the stairs that follows your tread up to the top. If you take the stairs, and you would just roll your bike up the rundle to be able to get up and cross over. So.
I thought that was a handy feature, so I appreciate that. Yeah, like a matchbox car or something. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you again. Thank you for soliciting those funds and, like
you're welcome.
Stated earlier, working with other entities. Okay, let's go on to item number D. Leon Paulson. So I guess
me again.
Joellen. Okay, I was going to say the initial I had here was somebody else. So great, keep on going.
Okay,
you're on a roll.
So I'm here to introduce the resolution 2423. This resolution, if passed, will authorize the execution of an agreement between Layton City and Leon Paulson Construction for the Ellison Park Parking Lot Expansion Project 2302, located at 725 North Cold Creek Way. The project includes the installation of a new parking lot light poles, and landscaping improvements. On May 16, 2024, 5 bids were received, with Leon Paulson's submitting the lowest responsible bid in the amount of $745,415. Staff recommends the council adopt Resolution 2423, authorizing the city manager to conduct negotiations and execute the agreement between Layton City and Leon Paulson for construction of the Ellison Park Parking Lot Expansion Project 2302. Are there any questions regarding this one?
Any questions, council? Come on, there's got to be a pickleball in there somewhere.
I got a question. Yeah,
Okay,
could you go back to the other slide?
Of
please?
course,
So
yes.
we've talked in the past of expanding at some point the pickleball courts east. Is that still?
Yes, you can see here down at the bottom of the screen, we have our 8 courts. If the time comes that we desire to expand the courts, they would be just to the east of that. So in this little site map at the top, context map, it would just be a mirror image of the layout to the east.
Great. Okay. Cool.
No.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
That's exciting to get that parking lot covered. I know a lot of people are waiting for that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, council, that's the items that were presented that you wanted to act on as a group. So let's go ahead and I'll entertain a motion on the consent items of A, B, and C. So whoever would like to make that motion, please make sure you state the ordinance number, and then afterwards we'll deal with C.
You want the ordinance, or does it matter?
Well, yeah, you need to mention it.
Sure, who made that up?
It's on your paper.
I know it's on my paper, but who made it up? Right? Am I right? Thank you. Mayor, I'd like to adopt ordinance 24-18, consolidated fee schedule. And then resolution 2421, which is the overpass. And then accept the bid award from Leon Paulson Construction at the Ellison Park Lot Expansion project 2302-02.
Second.
All right. Yeah. The last one
I
has
didn't say resolution.
resolution 24-23.
Oh, and resolution 24-23.
Still second.
Okay, thank
My
you.
eyes only work on one line, so.
Okay, I'll acknowledge that. Okay, it's been moved in second that we adopt the consent items for A, B, and D at this time. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Those pass. Let's now move on to item number C, which is an interlocal agreement between Davis County and Layton City. And Mr. Chad Wilkinson is going to present that item to us.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. As was stated, this is a proposal for an interlocal agreement between Davis County, Layton City, and Clearfield City for the purpose of establishing a home consortium program. And I'm going to turn a little bit of time over to Morgan Cloward from our city staff to explain a little bit about the home program, what some of the uses of those funds are, kind of the background of that. And then I'll jump in and talk a little bit about the interlocal agreement. I do want to acknowledge that we have representatives from the county here, Chanel Flores and Dakota Wurst, who are some of our colleagues from the Davis County Community Economic Development Department that can also answer questions if you have any for them. So with that, I'll turn it to Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We, of course, already have our Community Development Block Grant Program funding from HUD. This is in addition to the CDBG funding that we have if this is adopted. The Home Partnership Program is federal grant funding that goes to states and localities for affordable housing activities. We, of course, already have some CDBG housing activities, but this would help augment some of the activities we're already doing in the city, including home down payment assistance, helping with home rehab, repair activities, and funds also that would be helping low-income households with the rent with their household if that need arises. There's also other activities that that are in this agreement that would pertain to construction of homes and affordable housing units. And I'll go to the next slide. Right there, there are 8 different priorities that are spelled out in this agreement with the county. This would form a consortium if we decided to choose to join this. It would include Davis County and Layton City and Clearfield City. By forming this consortium, we would be able to qualify for HUD's minimum $500,000 funding threshold. We wouldn't be able to do this on our own. So that's one of the benefits of forming this consortium. And like I said, it would focus on different housing activities and different critical needs that are related to that within Layton City.
Thanks, Morgan. Just to talk briefly about the interlocal agreement now, this is, again, it's the formation of a consortium. This consortium, one of the things that we have had multiple discussions with county staff over the last several weeks has been about making sure that we have equal representation on the funding recommendations for this particular consortium. So the agreement before you tonight includes a provision that gives Layton City one of 3 votes on this consortium. There'll be a vote for Layton City, a vote for Davis County representing the other communities in the county as part of their urban county program, and then Clearfield City having a vote on this recommendations for funding on this particular program. We also have the ability to have some additional committee members that would be non-voting committee members that would be able to provide additional advisement, non-binding recommendations as far as what this funding should be spent on. I want to talk just a little bit more about these 8 priorities. So this was something that was important to us because this is a large group of communities, a large group of stakeholders involved. We want to make sure that we had some clarity on what types of projects and what types of priorities could be funded. Those eight items there in front of you represent those 8 policy priorities that we have, again, working closely with county staff have identified. and that we've agreed to be as staff is to be a part of this interlocal agreement to bring to you. Our additional change that we've requested to the interlocal agreement is that any changes to those priorities could only be made by unanimous consent of those consortium members to their voting members of that committee. So if there was to be a suggested change to these priorities, or if the county commission acting as the lead jurisdiction would wish to want to fund something that's not identified on those priorities, that could only occur through unanimous consent of those committee members. I want to just add that we have our legal staff has continued to review this document. We do have, should the council determine they would like to adopt this tonight, we do have some additional clarifying changes that we would want to be a part of any adoption. If you get to that point, I'd be happy to show you what those potential changes are. They don't change the structure. They're just clarifications on some of those items, such as what unanimous consent means on some of those items, and some other things that I can walk you through if you'd like. And I can do that now if you'd like, or I can wait till there's some deliberation from the council, whichever you'd like. That being said, with the changes that we've been able to work with county staff on, we are recommending that the council adopt this interlocal agreement, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, council, do you have questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, on this number 3, oh, I can read it up there. Property acquisition. Are there limits? Excuse me, time limits? Like when you acquire it, you can't just sit on it for 10 years?
I think those are, Morgan, you maybe could stress this would be on things like even our existing program that we have with property acquisition for Have a Heart and for so these funds that we get approved, please jump in if I say anything amiss. Anything that we get approved through HUD is constrained. There's a time constraint on those funds.
Okay.
You'll remember sometimes we'll come in later on and say we need to reallocate some of these funds that weren't spent from a previous period.
Right.
So we do have that time constraint built into any of these funding for any of these projects. You want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just to add to your point, whenever we have a 5-year consolidated plan with our CDBG funds, we have to have within that time frame different activities that are completed. And I can't speak to all the details with home, but it is, again, money from HUD, and they do have some parameters where there's some timeliness where you have to accomplish various activities.
Okay. So we can put pressure on people to say, you've got to, you got to move on this.
That's right.
Right.
I have a question for Clint. In the document, it says any changes to the funding priorities shall be approved by unanimous vote of the committee. In addition, the Davis County Commission shall not approve funding for any project not identified in the funding priorities without unanimous approval of the committee. So, I guess help me understand the legality of us binding the Davis County Commissioners and making a decision legislatively in which they're a party to this agreement. So this agreement is enforceable against them, and it would prevent them from legislative action.
Correct.
Okay. And then the last question I had is, it said, should the committee be unable to agree upon a resolution in a dispute, it should be referred to the legislative body of the county for resolution. So in the end, they're going to make the decision anyway.
Yep, and I wasn't part of that negotiation. Chad could probably speak to that more as far as the progression of that, but I had that exact same comment, that exact same concern.
Okay.
So that's the reason for these guardrails. That was a concern of ours as well. We do recognize that there has to be a lead jurisdiction. Someone has to make that decision. Ultimately, we had discussions about what that would look like. Is there some other third-party appeal board or something? And what we came to was this solution, which is to say where we are going to constrain those decisions based on these priorities. You can bump things up and down based on what's the priority for that particular year, but these are the things that we would identify as being fundable projects through that. So that was our way to try to at least, again, I use the term guardrails. It's trying to put some kind of guidance to what that decision could be by the commission.
Okay.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. We have maybe a similar arrangement with the RAMP Commission.
where and you have you use the word funding, the board of funding recommendations.
Mhm.
The ramp committee comes in and to give us the recommendations, and most of the time yep, that's great, and we vote on it. But there has been some times where we're like, nah, we want to do this, and like, thank you for your recommendations. Once again, in the future, we've been voted into office to represent Layton citizens, so we're pretty selfish, I think, and would not like to have happen where the funding recommendation is, yeah, we're going to do this project in Layton, and then it gets to the county commission and they're like, we're not going to do that. We're going to do it for Farmington, or we're going to do it for whomever. That's the kind of there's guardrails, but still.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think that's why we've identified those. But that being said, you're correct. If there was within this within these parameters, there could be changes made after that funding recommendation was made. Now, again, it's only within these parameters, though. It couldn't be something outside of these listed priorities.
I guess I have one more thought, and then I'll be quiet. I promise.
Fine. I'll run it down.
You're right. And we touched on this a little bit in the work meeting, and we're supposed to be policy. It's what we're supposed to be doing, and we got day-to-day people working on this and staff on both sides, the county and you all, and we appreciate that and appreciate the negotiations. I guess one of the thoughts, and I think Bettina and Zach both mentioned the funds on the county side, that the county has a lane, and this is their lane. This tenant-based rental assistance, home assistance, the health, we have jobs to do in the city, and the county has jobs to do for the county, and wouldn't want to see the county has a bucket already paid for by all of us with property taxes, and there's a bucket of money, and they use that for some of this stuff already. And so now we do this and replace this with that money, and now they've got money freed up to do something else with, some other project, some other thing, maybe not even having to do with housing. Those are the kind of things that, who knows, when we negotiate here and when we talk about this stuff. And so that gives me pause as well.
Yeah, I totally appreciate that. I think with these dollars, it is constrained dollars. So these as CDBG funds are constrained as well. They have to be used towards low to moderate income folks that are out there. So that it's the same kind of constraints with these home dollars. So it would be an additional pot of funding that's not available right now. We do see some benefit to that, and I think our original discussion with the county several months ago was very, very focused on rental assistance. As we've spoken with the county, though, we do see that there is the potential for some good to be done throughout the county with these funds that Layton City can be a partner with. So I want to make sure that it's known that we do see some positives to this type of an arrangement. That's why we've recommended approval. Our biggest concern as staff, though, is that with those positives, we make sure that we've mitigated anything that could happen, as you're saying, that we don't necessarily enable things to be funded that we don't have some input on, and eventually, or I guess even to the point of having some very strict guidelines for what they can fund those, or what they can use those funds for. I will say, I didn't mention this before, but the other part that we see as a positive of this is this would be administered by the county, so this would not put an additional administrative burden on the city necessarily, other than we would have someone on that recommendation committee that would have to be to those meetings and make that recommendation and be a voting member. So that being said, though, we have concerns as well. We've tried to address those concerns by some of these again, guidelines, guardrails, whatever you want to call them, that we've placed in this agreement.
I'm looking at things a little different. It's not really odd for me, but if I'm correct, no matter what the agreement, whether you agree with it and the county commissioners say, no, we're going to do something else, it doesn't cost us a nickel. Is that right?
I
except for the time involved.
Right, yeah, this is additional.
Okay,
funding,
so
yeah.
we're not putting in funds and then having the county spend it. These are funds that are allocated to the county, and they're giving us a way to help diffuse some of the money. So in that respect, I feel like that's a positive, because especially where it mentions tenant-based paying for rent, which is a positive because we use that considerably throughout the year. You also mentioned this is a 2-year deal. Is that right?
The term of this agreement is 2 years.
Okay, so at the end of 2 years, we can decide to bag it, stay with it, or change it? Okay, so there's a chance. So if we look at this for 2 years, in my opinion, the only thing we may get in 2 years is nothing. Okay? It's not the first time I haven't got nothing in 2 years. But the chances of increasing some things which you do we have a chance. And so in that respect, I don't feel like we're not committing any money. We're not taking anything away from the city. It may be good, it may be bad, but we're not going to be holding a bag somewhere. We just won't get it. But we do have the chance to help increase, especially our rental assistance. So in that respect, I'm saying I don't see a downside. That doesn't mean there isn't one. There's a lot of things I don't understand fully, but from what I can get from this, worst case scenario is we go 2 years and get told no 10 times. So I've been told 10 times no, a lot of times. So anyway, we don't lose any money. And that's my biggest concern with Layton residents, that we're not committing anything that we could lose. So I kind of see it as I'm not going to say real positive, because sometimes I don't look enough in the future where it could be. But at the end of 2 years, if it's not working, I don't have a problem saying no.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a really good point. I think one thing that was brought up in the work meeting that and the reason why we've asked for some changes is we want to make sure that we are putting the structure together correctly up front, so that we don't get 2 years down the road and have expectations of continued funding where we do pull out at that point. We'd prefer to be into an agreement that we don't feel like we have to pull out of, and have that threat of being pulled out of. So we want to make sure that the agreement's correct up front. And that's the reason for some of these changes.
Councilman Bloxham.
Yeah, I actually echo everything you were just saying, Councilman Thomas, because I feel like it's a way for us, and I would say where the agreement is now, I think I feel comfortable with it for many of the same reasons that you mentioned. Mostly that it's a way for us to be a team player, to kind of get involved, allow more money to flow in to potentially help Layton residents, and that is not an expectation that it will, but the ability that maybe it will. And I think that if the county commissioners decide they want to allocate it one way, that's their prerogative. But without our ability to enter into the agreement, then we wouldn't be able to have the funds. And I think there's a part of us that if it's not costing us any money and we've alleviated a lot of the concerns. My last question, though, Clint, is I do have some worry about the HUD statement that I read about the purpose of the program and the homelessness. I know that's not on a specific, that's in the agreement. It refers to the Exhibit A, these interlocal agreement priorities, as the only ones. Do you see any of these being massaged legally into any sort of acceptance of homelessness per se? I'm not talking about a family who needs homeless assistance. I'm talking about generally understood term homelessness.
Yeah, I think it would be stretched beyond anything that I can come up with there, but
Okay, and that's where I'm at. I am comfortable with it for many of the reasons that you mentioned and those that I just mentioned. Appreciate the staff in doing the legwork on it. Appreciate it.
Okay. Mayor, may I?
Sure, go ahead.
So along those same lines, I did have an additional question. So in the work meeting, just for those who did not stream that, there were a number of questions that I had about this program, what it can fund, what it cannot fund, how it supports the city, how it does not, and specifically asking around this homelessness shelter question, just because we know that that's top of mind in the state and also in the county. I do have a concern that at some point in interim or in the next legislative session, that some verbiage could change and that some of these items that we have on this list, while well thought out, could still be construed in a different way. That's just the reality. So I do still have that concern. But I see, as both Councilmember Bloxham and Councilmember Thomas have stated, that this could be Layton City being a team player, so to speak. We're talking about $500,000, $750,000 for a year. We just approved 2 items prior to this presentation where each of those items were that $750,000 amount. And so it's obvious that this would not necessarily be it's a lot of money, but it wouldn't be a lot of impact necessarily to Layton City residents. And so my question is, and this may be for the representatives from the county, if there are any projects that are kind of already in thought from the other entities that would be asked to partner here in this consortium with Layton City. Just because with Layton City, our priorities are actually near the bottom of this priority list, which would be the direct home buyer assistance, the homeowner rehabilitation, the tenant-based written assistance, whereas the county's priorities apparently are those in the top, area where it's more homes, more multifamily projects, things of that nature. So would you be able to speak to that? If there are any other cities who already have ideas about these types of projects they're interested in.
Yeah, I can speak on that. Thank you, Mayor, Council. My name is Dakota Worth. I'm the housing coordinator for Davis County Economic Development. To clarify, are you asking if there's any projects being kind of conceptualized at the moment from other cities specifically?
That would be able to potentially benefit from this type of a program?
I don't know of any specific projects in mind at this stage. We really want to get the framework in place, the agreement signed, the funding secured. Philosophically, though, I think the reason why you're seeing, 1, a distinct list of 8 priorities, and 2, at the top of that priority list being geared towards larger scale projects, is that where this is kind of while it's a lot of money, it's a smaller pot of money than what you need to do an actual development. I think the focus or the hope is that it can garner the attention in construction or facilitate larger projects that move the needle. But the key there is with the funding committee that is outlined in the agreement that a representative from Layton will sit on from Clearfield and a county commissioner, is that they can review these priorities year to year, determine what we need in our community countywide, whether that's in Layton, whether it's in West Point, North Salt Lake, wherever it may be that is most needle moving for that funding session, and kind of go from there. So right now it's 1 through 8 and they could shuffle and they could change, but we're just excited about what kinds of projects that these funds will attract from community partners, from cities, from whoever wants to increase or preserve the supply of affordable housing.
So potentially like 1 big project per year could maybe be what you'd be looking at if you were looking at items 1 through 3, for example.
It could. And ultimately what we could do is, if a enticing enough project came in that first session, you can bank year to year the funds for this program and allocate it either in phases year to year or in year 2 and kind of do something significant. Or if the only requests that you receive are for tenant-based rental assistance, for direct home buyer assistance, just dole that out on a year-to-year basis. but it's got a lot of optionality to it.
You mentioned that this is solely based on applications.
Yeah, it is solely based on applications as well. Kind of similar to how CDBG requests come in, is how this is assessed at the county level.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good answer. Councilmember Roberts, did you still have a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Chad, Morgan, your team, thanks. This is a lot different than I anticipated at walking into the meeting tonight. I appreciate these guardrails as I see them, the priorities, and also the equal voting between members. I think that's important to protect Layton. But one thing you mentioned, if you can expound on it, maybe you said additional committee members can be added non-voting. Is there a limit to that, or what? Is there any other information about that in the agreement?
There is a limit, and I'd have to pull up the agreement. Is it 4 additional?
I remember reading 4.
I think that's correct. Yeah,
That's
it's
great.
7 total. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
The numbers changed a little bit. That's why I was trying to remember which number we ended up. So
I'm always leery of unlimited committee sizes.
Yeah.
Water can get muddy quick.
as are we. I think our county colleagues would agree with that as well. So
Now we meet with Morgan comes, once or twice a year and talks about how we're doing or how we're allocating CDGB grant and funding. We've talked about how that's a great meeting. We appreciate seeing how we can help out. But one consistent question I remember having or hearing the last 2 times Morgan presented to us was, I wish we could do more.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate the safeguards that protect Layton's interests here. And with that, I'm good with this, which is not how I felt walking into this meeting tonight. So thank you.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you've done an excellent job on explaining it. And myself, I see this as no different than what we challenge our staff to do, is that to go out and find additional funding so that we can better our community. And I think that's what the county's been tasked with here. So, I think it's a good program, providing you do follow the rules. Okay. Council, if you're through deliberating, I'll entertain a motion on item C of our consent items.
Yeah, may I?
You may continue.
I told you I wasn't going to talk, but here I am again talking. I know. Kim asked me our clerk, Kim Reed, asked me how I was feeling tonight and told her feisty. And I am. And it's, I mentioned we're selfish, and we are. We represent this community, and it's important to us, and don't like generally when others seem to just use, just go ask Layton, or it kind of bugs me sometimes, and this one did as well. And I have concerns still. However, listening to Dave, he's wise. He's been around a long time, a really long time. Not here, but on the earth. But I appreciate the wisdom of presenting the maybe what I'm most concerned about, and that's the funds that we have here in Layton City, and have this not be tied to anything that we invest in or could lose, and that's wise. My hope is, however, that this could, I guess, if it helps one Layton family, whether if it lands on the priority and it lands in the funding, then I guess that's helping one Layton family. So I appreciate the deliberation. I appreciate the patience with the feisty members who get excited and then sit back and ruminate on what some of our council members say. I'm glad we're a council and we can do this together. So, thanks, Mayor.
Okay. Okay.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion, but before I do, I'd like to make an oration. So sit back. I never speak for more than mine. To me, When I first started on this council, I thought it stunk. For me personally, I go, what am I doing here? I'm not making any great decisions. But as I got older, I come to realize that, there's a difference of opinion in people. And I, for one, appreciate feistiness more than anything. For one reason, it makes me think. And then I can think a different way. Now, that being said, you got something to see? What do you bother me for?
I'm just listening.
You're just listening? Okay. I thought you were up there trying to say something.
Nope.
I move that we do adopt Resolution 24-22.
Now I do have something to say if I could, Madam Mayor. We do have those few changes. I'd like to throw those up on the screen just so our county counterparts are aware of what we're talking about. These are clarifications. We would recommend that should you adopt this tonight, that these be added to that. So let me just pull those up real quick. The first one is the longest one, and that is.
We're supposed to read this?
I'll get there and then I'll stop.
You're not keeping up with this?
So the first one, I'm gonna put on the track changes so you can see it. I went the wrong way. Let's try that again. Okay, first one is this: that there is no obligation for any party to renew or amend this agreement for an additional term. Any new term shall be negotiated and agreed upon in writing unanimously to the parties by the parties. No amendment shall apply or take effect unless made pursuant to the amendment section that's in the agreement further down. We wanted to clarify that it's new non-voting members that can be added to the consortium upon the consent of the simple majority of the committee. That if not, so we're not adding new voting members. And if a new member is added during the term of the agreement, that there has to be an amendment to this agreement accordingly. And then that's last clarification is just again back to that unanimous consent idea that if we're modifying or amending this, it has to be by the unanimous written agreement signed by the parties. So those would be our changes that we would ask that you include in any adoption of this agreement.
Can he handle that? So you need to.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear him.
So what you need to do on your motion is continue with the added amendments.
I asked you if you had anything to say. You said no.
Not yet.
According to my amendment, then I amend my amendment to accept whatever he said.
Oh,
If that don't work, somebody else make an amendment.
a motion.
Yeah.
It's a motion.
A motion.
Yeah. So you're making
I make a motion
Thank you.
that we accept what was told to us by Chad through the verbiage on this screen and add that to my amendment, my
Original
my
motion. Okay. All right, I'll accept that. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second that we adopt Resolution 24-22 with the amendments that were presented on the screen here. So with that, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Passes. Okay, that concludes our consent items as presented. So now we'll move on to our public hearing portion of our meeting. We do have 3 items that are part of the public hearing. So we're going to start out with our finance director, Tracy Probert's going to present the amended budget for the year 2023-24. Are you ready? Okay, which is ordinance 24-16, excuse me. So once he gets the screen pulled up, then we'll go ahead and move on to this public portion of our meeting. And once Tracy presents the budget, then we'll open up the public hearing, and the public hearing will remain open for all 3 items.
Mayor, members of the council, as the mayor mentioned, we have ordinance 24-16 to amend.
Do we?
I don't know what that is. The basketball game? Not sure where that even came from.
He's just testing you.
To amend the current fiscal year budget for 2023-2024. As displayed on the screen, in the general fund, there, and I'm going to just cover this in summary real quick, there is $1,528,152.59 in additions and or small reductions to the budget. Those are in three areas. 238,000 and change is related to appropriations of fund balance, where we've used reserve to cover expenses that weren't anticipated to be as high as they ended up being during the year. Some of those were related to the Public Defender's Office, street maintenance and operations, and also the ski bus operation program. $831,543 were related to revenue that was unanticipated when we originally adopted the budget. A little over 400,000 of that is related to dispatch consolidation, which was paid to us in order to provide dispatch services to Clearfield City and North Davis Fire. And then 458,000 of these funds are related to grants, which were either unanticipated or the amount was unknown when we originally adopted the budget. A lot of those grants relate to the police department and the work that they do, and so they apply for those on an annual basis. There was one unusual grant, the Clean Diesel Program, which provided money for us to turn in an old fire engine because of the diesel engine that was in that apparatus, and to be able to use those funds, the grant funding, to purchase a newer fire engine. In other funds in the city that amendments are proposed, the Davis Metro Narcotics Strike Force Fund had additional grant funding that came in for overtime and supplies. We proposed to use Proposition 1 fund balance to help cover overages on the Welker and Hidden Hollow to Hobbs Trail projects. Building services had additional revenue and also wage expenses, which need to be recognized in the budget. The RAMP program had a grant for interns at the museum. The CDBG fund received additional grant revenue from prior years allocations to purchase land in conjunction with the Davis School District for the home building program that we participate in. The Capital Projects Fund is increased, and that's mostly related to monies that were received in the general fund, and then because they were of a capital nature, they're transferred to the Capital Projects Fund. And the Emergency Medical Fund, $92,000, mostly related to wildland fire, where our emergency medical personnel go out to fires that are happening throughout the western United States mostly. $323,000, most of which was for the repair of a 10-inch water line that goes under I-15. $159,000 in increase in maintenance and repair for street lighting. $101,000 in use of the athletic fund balance to purchase an infield groomer and netting for those programs. And $185,000 transfer from the general fund to the swimming pool fund to cover shortfalls in revenue and also increased expenses in the pool fund, in anticipation that we may have ended up in a fund balance deficit in that fund. So that amendment was recommended. Yes, Councilman Thomas.
If you go back to the ramp, it says transfer. I can't read it. Help me out.
So it's money that was transferred to the general fund to cover interns at the museum. So
Okay,
RAMP had agreed to cover interns working at the museum, and so we were transferring funds from RAMP to the museum.
Okay, I have a problem with that because in RAMP, it mentions you can't use money to hire people individually. Now, if you said, instead of using the term interns, whatever they were doing, I don't know, taking pictures, that's why they're there.
Okay.
But in the ramp, I was under the impression that you can't use it to hire people.
Well, I don't know that they were hired.
As a group, if you're going to lay asphalt, you got to hire people to lay it.
right.
Okay.
So
I
if
get
I'm
it.
remembering back to the specifics of this, they brought on some individuals to help with the collections and also to organize the data. And so it was more of a temporary type situation with specific tasks. It wasn't something where they're hiring someone on for a prolonged,
For a
like a
prolonged
part-time
period.
employee that's going to be there.
Okay.
Almost more like a contractor to come in and help
Okay.
them organize some of the collections and data.
I just hate it when I think like a lawyer.
Okay.
Okay. And when
And
you
don't do
say, when it said interns, to me, that meant a person.
Yeah.
And
Well, they
I
did bring
understand
people in
yeah,
for
no, I
those
understand.
specific tasks.
But I'm
Yes.
wondering if we, if the wording, okay, we don't have to worry. Somebody's going to come back and say, well, wait a minute. You said you hired an intern. Why can't I hire a guy to take tickets or something? What, I don't know.
It's okay.
We're okay. Yeah. Okay. I apologize for even.
It's a good
mentioning.
question. No, thank you for the clarification.
No, you're on. Okay,
Then I don't apologize.
any other questions?
Just, oh,
Go ahead.
thanks, Mayor. Just a comment on the water, the repair for the 10-inch water line under I-15. Just a comment that budgets are tight. I mean, we're not flush with cash as a city, and therefore you have to have some reserve when something like this happens. It's not in the budget. You wouldn't have been able to budget for this to happen. And if you remember, we had I-15 that was like a sponge with the water underneath it. And so just kudos to the how we staff the budgeting for rainy day, budgeting for emergencies. Not crazy, but having enough just in case, because stuff like this happens. So just an appreciation.
Okay. Any other comments?
And I would
Okay.
recommend that you open the public hearing related to the amendments.
Okay. Someone want to make that motion to open the public hearing?
I move that we open the public hearing to discuss the budget.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, the public hearing is now open, so if there's anyone who wishes to speak to this item, you're welcome to come up to the podium, state your facts. Okay, seeing that there's none, I'll go ahead and bring it back to the council. Let's go ahead and take action on item number A, amending the current fiscal year budget.
I move that we accept ordinance, is it accept or adopt? Accept or adopt? Adopt?
Adopt's fine, yeah.
I move that we adopt ordinance 2416 or -16 for the amendment of the budget for fiscal year 23-24.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second that we adopt ordinance 24-16. So this is a roll call vote. I'll start down here with Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilman Bloxham,
Yes.
Councilman Morris,
Aye.
Councilman Smith Edmondson,
Aye.
Councilman Thomas.
Aye.
Okay, there you have it. It passes. Okay, our public hearing is still open, so let's go ahead and move on to item number B, which Tracy will present it again, which is the adoption of the budget for 24-25.
Thank you very much. We have ordinance 24-17, as you mentioned. Adopt the budget, property tax rate, and compensation schedule for elective, statutory, and appointed officers for the fiscal year 24-25. Just a brief summary of what's in this budget. First off, I would mention that we have not, or the county is not proposed that we adopt a property tax increase. So no property tax increase for Layton City as part of a Layton City tax. This ordinance proposes that we adopt the tax rate proposed by the county and the state and approved by them. In this budget, there's $46 million in general funds, which for the most part covers your police, fire, streets, general administration, community development, a lot of the general operations of the city, parks and recreation being very important. We've discussed a lot of that tonight. Total citywide budget of $138 million, which includes all of the utilities and the emergency medical fund. And so those make up a very significant part of the budget. In the budget, it's proposed for market and cost of living adjustments for the mayor, officers, and employees, and also merit adjustments for the employees. That does not include increases for the city council. There's 2.4 million in capital equipment, 30.8 million in capital projects. About 18 million of that is utilities, and the other is other assorted projects related to streets, parks, dispatch center, so forth. There are 4 full-time positions proposed, 2 of those in the stormwater maintenance department. And so those are enterprise funds where we charge fees for stormwater services. And then in the general fund, in the emergency management fund, an emergency manager for the city. Since the assistant city manager retired, we've been having those duties performed by someone else. And so it's important for the city to have an emergency manager. And then also just skipped my mind, fire inspector, that's what it is. And so a full-time fire inspector. The 3 part-time are 1 facilities manager for recreation. They felt it'd be important to have an adult at those facilities, managing them, and also 2 additional crossing guards. Some of the major projects included are the Emergency Communication Dispatch Center, work on West Hillfield Road, the potential for land purchase for Public Works shop expansion, and a potential land purchase for Sugar Street realignment. And on top of that, a large, long list of utility and street projects that cover and various park projects that make up the rest of that budget. The budget funding sources are broken up into, from the general fund, sales tax makes up a large majority of that. Property tax is a small portion. The charges for services are mostly utility funds. From the expenditure side, 40% of the expenditures are for compensation, 29% for operations, and 26% related to capital equipment and projects. Some of the things that changed from the tentative budget, and probably the two to point out on this list, we pointed these out in the previous public hearing, would be the addition of the emergency manager position in the MS fund, and also the increase in the sewer rate. It's been proposed to increase sanitary sewer rate 8.2% effective July 1st. Those are the very brief highlights of what is in the budget for 2024-2025. Are there any questions?
Council, any questions?
I have one, maybe for Alex. Could you talk about there's in the proposed budget, there's a cost of living increase and then also a merit adjustment. Can you talk to that, how you work on the process for merit adjustment, even if it's warranted?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you. We really have there's a multitude of systems that entities use to compensate their employees. Layton City has historically, for the last 30 plus years, used one that's very much oriented on performance-based compensation. There are others that do it just based on longevity, and the performance isn't, the merit isn't a heavy component of that. We've always, again, expected to hire the best people and to expect the best work from them and then reward them based on that. So the merit and COLA that you talked about is an important piece of that. The merit system that we have allows for an increase between 0 and 5% based on score, and those scores are consistent. The issues that are looked at and the approach that's taken is consistent all across the city. They're not a program for police and a program for fire is very consistent because we have the same expectations for all the employees. On the COLA, cost of living side, we look at what's happening in the market, changes in the CPI. We also do some market comparisons to look at that. The cost of living component is important to avoid what's called compression. You have general increases and where you have, or potentially have if you don't address those from time to time, or even on a regular basis, is that you have creep where recently there's been significant inflationary pressures on the bottom end of hiring people. And then you have somebody that's coming in and has been working here 10 years is getting paid the same as about somebody maybe have 2 years. That makes sense. It's because of the entry level salaries are so high. So the cost of living is an important piece in doing that, but largely it reflects it tries to keep the employees held harmless. If inflation is going up 3 or 4 or 5%, then there needs to be, in order to retain and attract employees to stay with you, good employees, there needs to be some adjustment to recognize that, so their buying power is not declining. And then the other thing we do, the other piece is market surveys. So every year we go out and do an independent comparison of like positions with other cities that we compare to, and we live by that market. We don't make exceptions to it, typically. And when we do, they're very small. So we try to be very market oriented, and so I don't know if that's kind of the general framework. But have been lucky enough through the years to have good employees and we have a lot of longevity with employees, and we feel like we have a system it's intended to be predictable, and it's open, and you know, if you come to Layton and work hard and do well, you'll do well. That's what we want. So
Okay. All right. Very good.
Just one thing to that. Having been under that piece of thing for 30 years, it not only works to the plus, but yet as a supervisor, you, what's the term I want for your people that you work for them? To what? No, you do their evaluation. And then that's checked by the department heads. And sometimes they come back and say, do you really think they're doing that good? Because they may not be. And I had instances where that happened. So I want you to know that it's not just, oh, I like you, here you go. There's other people that check it to make sure that it's deserved. And I always appreciated that when everything was said and done, it was deserved for everything I saw anyway. So.
Okay. Thank you. Councilman Bloxham.
Yeah, Tracy, can you go back a few slides to the pie chart? One more. Yeah, this one. And so I like, I don't know if you did this intentionally, but charges for services usually says fees. That usually. I really like the way you changed it, because I think that it's important when you see the word fee. I think you think I'm being charged something that I shouldn't be charged, right? I bought a movie ticket online and they charged me this $10 fee just so I could print it off on my phone. Why did I have to pay that? But in governmental funding, when we're talking about taxes and fees, I think charges for services is how it should be at, because we're paying for water, we're paying for sewer, we're paying for garbage, we're paying for all of this stuff that we're doing as a city. And it's not for no reason. It's to fund the system, it's to fund the service so that so the system can work for your residents. And so I just noticed that, and I like it, because I think that's what we do. We, like Councilman Morris always says, you know, we're in the service delivery business. That's what we do. And I think that the idea of charging for services, that's why we have these rates set they are. It's not a fee. We're charging them for the services that the system is providing, that they're receiving, and that they can pay into the system to make it continue. So I just appreciate that change.
Great.
Thank you. Councilman.
Thanks, Tracy. So you mentioned the employees that are the new employees I think it was one of your first pages. And then on the last page you showed, it talked about the additional crossing guard at Angel and Weaver, which I remember in previous discussions. What's the distinction between adding 2 more on a different page, but this one is an addition? I probably forgot to update this page. This should be 2. So there's one at Angel and Weaver and one at, I forget where the other one is.
Tracy, I can help on that. The difference is that the 2 were originally proposed in the tentative budget. This was a request that came in after the tentative budget had been approved.
Okay, so that's what I wondered. So is this a third one?
No, excuse me. There was one before and one now.
Okay, it used to be. Okay, there was one and then there's another one. You're right.
And those are approved based on warrants. So what has to meet a certain criteria, and Alan Q. Swanson came and said that we've had an additional warrant, it's that warrant. And I said, let's go ahead and recommend it because it meets the criteria.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions? Okay, I'll bring it back to the council then for action on item B of our public hearing.
I do have one question. I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
And we probably should have brought this up earlier, but in the last meeting, I did ask when we discussed the removal of the council member addition. I did discuss maybe looking at what the amounts would be had the council member proposed increase be based on just those 3 cities that we used to determine the mayoral increase for this year and also for the previous year. Wondered if you had done that. And also if that's something moving forward that can be done instead of incorporating, I think there were 9 maybe cities total, instead of incorporating, I mean, you can leave them in the list, but instead of using all 9 to determine potential increases for the elected positions, not just mayor, but the city council as well, maybe using just those 3 cities. I believe it was South Jordan, West Jordan, and so West Valley, South Jordan, West Valley, and Orem. Does that sound right?
Okay. I did not have a chance to look at that before this meeting, but it is something that we can definitely do.
Yeah, I would like to see that. As was mentioned a lot during our last meeting, that it's important to, and even in this meeting, we weren't talking about electeds necessarily, but with market studies, just looking at what's going on across the state and looking at being, for lack of a better term, I guess, fair in the system and just seeing what is being done across the board. Because while this is not beholden to any single one of us who are sitting up here, on this dais, it's just the idea of the position and the worth that goes with that, worth and work that goes with that. And also letting city residents know that these are elected positions, but they are elected positions that are held and are able to be held by anybody in the city, not just someone who is able to do it because of their status, their wealth, or any of those types of things. I personally don't want anyone to feel like they're precluded from participating in the process because they wouldn't be able to, attend all the things, take off work, etc. So I would like to see that looked at. I would also like to see that those 3 cities be the cities that we look at when discussing any opportunity for increase and not increase, but just in general to make sure that those are the cities that we continue to compare ourselves with because they're in the same line with us as far as size as well as form of government.
Okay.
Councilman Roberts, did you have a question? Okay, actually, this is a public hearing, so I do need to call for public input first before we bring it back to the council to vote on this. So anyone wish to speak to the budget for the 2024-25, you're welcome to do so. Okay, seeing that there are none, I'll bring it back to the council for actions. Council, would you like to make a motion for item B?
What are we doing? Madam Mayor, I make a motion that we adopt ordinance 24-17, the budget, tax rate, property tax rate, and compensation schedule for elected, salary, and appointed officers for fiscal year 24 and 25. 2024 and 2025.
Okay, thank you.
I second it.
Okay, it's been moved in second that we adopt ordinance 24-17. I'll do a roll call vote on this. I'll start out with Councilmember Morris.
Aye.
Councilmember Bloxham.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith Edmondson.
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas.
Aye.
And Councilmember Roberts.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That passes. We'll now move on to item number C, which is an annexation and rezone request. And Mr. Chad Wilkinson will present this information for us.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This item, as was stated, is a annexation. I'm going to get the right presentation. I'm going to give you Tracy's presentation again because it was so good.
Oh, and you want to redo that one?
Let's go back here. There we go. So this is an annexation and rezone request. There are two ordinances that accompany this this proposal tonight. Ordinances 2421 and 2422. The reason for that is there's a separate action required, or a separate ordinance required for the annexation and for the rezone. The property is shown there on the screen, outlined in red. This is at the very north end of Fairfield Road. Hill Air Force Base is over here to the west. The Sun Hills Golf Course to the east. Some of the existing industrial and residential development to the south, and then unannexed, unincorporated county property to the north and east. This is just a little bit closer view. You can see the existing uses there, the Keel Mac building, the Janicki building. There's another building that's been constructed on this part of the jail-owned property that's currently going through some additional construction prior to occupancy. This gives just an overview of that East Gate area. This is part of a master plan for this East Gate area. We've had, the city has had an option on this property for many, many years. That option to purchase was exercised a few months ago. That was purchased from Waste Management. That property, the next step for getting that property into the city, of course, is an annexation. That was in unincorporated county before, so this property would be annexed. And then the proposed zone change is because our annexation policy right now brings any new parcel in from the county as agricultural zoning automatically. And so that would require a zone change to the proposed M1 zoning, which again is consistent with the industrial properties that surround or that are adjacent to this property. Here's a copy of the annexation plat. You can see the two parcels there that make up that total property. Again, the total property is about 24 acres, 24 and a half acres of ground that is made up of those two individual parcels. Again, the reason behind this property purchase and annexation is to facilitate continued growth of the Eastgate economic development area, and also to facilitate the further extension of Fairfield Road, which will eventually loop over and connect at 1700 East to the east there, closer to the existing dump access road. So with that, we are recommending that the council approve those two ordinances that I stated there, 2421 and 2422. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Hey, council, you have any questions?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, if I may, Chad, any additional procedural things that the city has to do, since this is us that owns the land, it's not some resident out there? Do we have to do anything in addition to a regular resident to bring an annexation and a zone change?
We'll have to do just all the steps that anybody else would have to do. So this would now be forwarded on to the state for their approval, and then eventual, well, county and state for their approval, and then eventually recording.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, good question. Anyone else? Okay, I'll open it up then to the public, since this is a public hearing. If anyone wishes to speak to this item, you're welcome to. Okay, seeing that there's none, I'll bring it back to the council for additional deliberation or action regarding the rezone request.
I move that we approve the annexation and rezone request, ordinance 24-21 and ordinance 24-22.
Okay, it's been, and yes,
and
and
that, may I amend that motion? And to close the public hearing.
thank you. Okay, it's been moved and second, and our public hearing is now closed. So with that, I'll bring it back to the council for a vote. Councilman Thomas.
Aye.
Okay, Councilmember Smith Edmondson.
Aye.
Councilman Morris.
Aye.
Bloxham.
Yes.
Councilman Roberts.
Yay.
Hey, there you have it. It's unanimous. Okay, that's the last item on our published agenda. However, we do have an item that's considered unfinished business, and I believe right now I'd like to turn the time over to our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I had hoped to mention this in our work meeting, what would be more typically addressed, but wanted to make the council aware, the public general, that Mr. Terry Colburn has completed his tenure with the city and has submitted his retirement letter. and will be leaving the city as of June 28th this month, which happens to be his birthday, coincidentally. And Terry has served the city for almost 50 years. He's about 3 months short of that, and has had some challenges lately, and has come to that conclusion that he's wants to spend a little more time with family and friends. So Terry's done a great job in the department, and so we'll be opening that position and moving forward to fill that as well. But wanted you to know that he was not interested in, as you can probably imagine, as some kind of a public processional. And but I wanted to make sure, and he gave me his permission to communicate that to you. And I'm sure he would appreciate at the appropriate time, some communication, your appreciation for him as well. But he's asked not to have any kind of a big celebration or open house, that kind of a thing. That's classic Terry. But anyway, wanted you to know. So.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. This is, 50 years is a lot of years in one place. I don't know that I know anybody else that served that much time in one spot. So anyway. Yeah, that's been a while. Okay, council, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
We already did.
No, we didn't.
So moved.
Thank you. I will acknowledge that. So anyway, thank you everyone for attending our council meeting this evening, and I hope you have a good and safe, happy weekend coming up. Thank you. Yeah,